makes a great module great? Not a good module, not one you play, enjoy, then move on to the next, but the one the players will talk about in between sessions, plan their next moves, and try to continue the adventure to increase their enjoyment. That's the question behind the latest remaster, Test of the Warlords. This is the adventure that let the players know they've made it. They were done with hacking through dungeons. They were recognized by the powers that be, given increased duties and responsibilities, and expected to act like it. Welcome to Mystara. I'm Mr. Welch, and you're in the big leagues now. Test of the Warlords, code CM1, was the first companion-level module. It served as the backdrop for the next 3 companion modules, meaning you can run Earthshaker, Death's Ride, or Sabre River as a supplemental adventure, while you wait a turn for Warlords to get done. It was written in 1984 by Douglas Niles, with Caldwell and Easley sharing the cover and interior art credits respectively. Niles was also the man that gave us the War Machine mass combat system, and that's reflected in the book, using those rules rather heavily at the end. So to bring back the question, what makes Test of the Warlord such an iconic module that it is the next progression in your character's development? Keep on the Borderlands, you were a nobody with a sword walking into a cave. Isle of Dread, you were a somebody with a boat and a map to an unexplored island. Now you get to Test of the Warlords, you're a power player getting rewarded for your total awesomeness. Being rewarded as you go from Bob Johnson, Slayer of Rats, to Sir Bob Johnson, Bane of all Rats, complete with your own castle, domain, and human resource department. You have headed up to sunny Norwald, the Canada of Mystara, where King Erekal gives you a plot of land, says don't blow it, and then you're on your own. The change in focus from exploration to becoming a landed noble was literally a game changer for the players. This was a mixed bag, because people who wanted to keep exploring and killing things didn't want to sit down and worry about tax rates and flood control. Another issue was the fact that each player got their own domain, so while the fighter might need help repulsing orc raiders, the cleric has to raise money to replace an orphanage the newly defeated dragon just landed on. It stopped feeling like a party at times, and more like a bunch of friends that had problems going on adventures. Okay, this module is probably the most meta of all time. But this is where you start for those that wanted to be the barons, lords, and overall head cheeses. King Erekal is the son of Princess Ariadne, despite his lack of magic. He wanted his own place to call a kingdom, so his mom gave him Fantasy Canada. But he had to take his deadbeat half-brother with him. As Norwald was massive, he needed people to settle it. Now, he could have gone the impresario route, but that would have required him to parse out the nation, then arm people to defend themselves against ice Comanches, only to have the people he brought in revolt and launch their rebellion, because the locals wanted to disarm the impresarios, despite what the ice Comanches would do to them. And then you get the Canadian Alamo, which later gets a lot of people killed in their sleep by the pissed-off people he invited in the first place. Instead, he goes the Oklahoma land route rush, and everybody over level 15 can come in and grab a domain as long as they swear fealty, denounce Thyatus, pay taxes, and promise not to cross off Erekal's name on the Imperial Charter and write their own inn. Once you meet all those requirements, you get a landed title, and you don't even have to buy a square foot of land in Scotland. It's first come, first serve, so get those teleport spells ready. It helps if the party sticks together on the way there, then they have all their lands relatively nearby. If the Orc Horde attacks the fighter's lands, he can walk next door to knock on the cleric's portcullis and borrow a cup of mercenaries. The reason why the module is so good is not only is it modular, but it's open-ended. If your players love their new positions as part-time adventurers and full-time nobility, you don't have to end the adventure. It has a timeline of events from the starting land grab all the way to the invasion by Thyatus, and the party deciding whether to stay loyal, change sides, or try to write their name on the line labeled winner. While you think it would be foolish to buck Thyatus and Alphasia, Oceanson did just that, and it's getting along fine. If your players are really enjoying this new playstyle, the final invasion doesn't have to follow the timeline, and the players will never notice. You can keep the characters busy for years with intrigue and random adventures related to their domains. Of course, if they don't like the playstyle, then just speed up the timeline and move on to the next adventure. Part of the module's replayability was the players could always pick a different part of Norwald every new campaign. It was a brand new territory that TSR partially fleshed out for the characters so they could shape it themselves. This was virgin territory. They didn't have to drive out any pesky squatters that had been living for thousands of years in the players' new homes. I mean, they could, but the local indigenous types tend to be frost giants. If you can drive those guys out of their ancestral home, then you've earned the right to live there. Norwald has a climate similar to Canada. The players could head straight north, but good luck farming tundra. Most of the area is dense conifer forest laced with rivers and lakes, and don't forget all the mountains. Because this is Mystara, the players can create ports, mining towns, logging camps, hunting lodges, and Las Vegas of the North. It's all up to them. This is a total sandbox. They get to define the borders of the sandbox. Remember, go too far west and you run into the nightmare realm of Denegoth. Go too far north and you're on permafrost. South, you run into the Helldawners. And west, you run out of Norwald. Try to stay within those lines. Every DM must remember that this module deals with one of the missing pillars of D&D, that of world building. Everything you do in this module shapes your Mystara. The adventure even mentions this. If you've got a smoking hot elf babe that wants to be queen, King Earthshaker is on the list of most eligible bachelors. You can carve out your kingdom in a war of secession. Betray Alphaks to Thyatis. If you can cast spells, you might get promoted and return to Alphaks with a better title of nobility. Just wave goodbye to all those fighter and thief losers you used to call friends. Because this game is all about world building, none of this module is canon. It was retconned pretty hard when Dawn of the Emperors came out anyways. This is the first module that even mentioned Alphaks, though you don't get to see actual Alphaks until the box set comes out. The Companion and Master modules had the Cold War vibe between Thyatis and Alphaks. Still, the modules kept ramping the two nations to open conflict, rather than both empires realizing war between them as mutually assured destruction. If you want to keep with the official timeline, there's no war with Thyatis looming, and instead, concentrate more on dealing with Earthshaker being a nice guy but not a great leader. You gotta help this guy impress his mom so he doesn't take his new toy away in Norwald. There are very few NPCs in the adventure of the Royal Court. You've got the king, his good-for-nothing brother, the king of the neutral ocean send, and 2 advisors with minimal backstory. There's a handful of minor nobles to interact with, and this shows the early weirdness of the setting compared to the later gazetteers. Like a cleric from Glantry unhappy with the lack of respect her class gets there. That's a mild understatement. Or the Ethengarian scout named Alyssa Patrician, a traditional Mongolian name. Half of them are spies for Thyatis, and the rest potential allies. Snicker at the future continuity problems and change some names, and you're all good. There are only 2 significant events that are required in the module. One tests the party's ability to be diplomatic, and the other's a good old-fashioned knockdown dragout with an invasion of frost giants. You have to help the king get married, and if one of the party members isn't up to wooing said king, an emergency NPC is willing to step in and take the vows. He is Charisma 17, ladies, so he's a bit of a charmer. And for those playing Dwarven women, did I mention his back hair fetish? You can use a little bit of continuity ambiguity to add further to the adventure. It briefly mentions Earthshaker's older brother but doesn't name him, and only saying that he's ahead of Earthshaker in terms of secession. Aaron Alston hadn't invented Alphasia's spellcaster-only policy yet, and Earthshaker getting Norwald was later retconned into Ariadne bending the rules to help her son. Earthshaker only has one older brother, his half-brother Manchild Xandor. For real fun, you can have this guy crash the party, literally if he brings his flying castle. And I just noticed a continuity error. The 4 chaotic knights that try to disrupt the wedding are neutral in their stat block. The things you notice on a reread. Then you move on to the Frost Giant attack, which is pure combat. When the oceans freeze over in the winter, it creates a land bridge that the giants can cross from their home in Frosthaven. Then they do all sorts of neighborly raiding and pillaging, and the party has to stop them. This is an opportunity for mass combat with thousands of giants. Fortunately, they break into smaller bands, but you're dealing with them 100 at a time. The party has to raise its armies and try to stop the giants from sacking the capital. Plenty of military action and use of the war machine system. There are a lot of other minor encounters, mostly there to help forge alliances or put down threats before they start. You get to meet the crones of Christic Cave, where you get into a rather bizarre fight where you get great rewards if you can remember to raise all the people you just killed. If the party fails, one gets to play the Hag's Cabana Boy for the next 5 years as punishment. I hope you're good at foot rubs. You can meet and impress the leader of the local barbarian tribe and earn his help and his respect. You can ally with a kingdom of dwarves by dealing with the mad wizard Gargantua, though you don't get to meet the wizard sadly, or run other adventures during your downtime. Test of the Warlords is modular after all. The party can take the initiative and create their own adventures. You want to expand your territory? Expose the treasonous plot against King Earthshaker by Baron Evil McNaughtybad. Then you get to add his domain to yours. And then go from Baron Player Von Character to Count Player Von Character. Marry that super sexy Alyssa Patrician, the oddly named Ethengarian, and merge your 2 domains. Clean out the nearby wilderness of dangerous monsters and establish a new town to increase the range of your claim. If the players can think of it, they can do it. It's a sandbox where instead of exploring the setting, they're expanding it. Let them. There's a reason why this module is iconic. Test of the Warlords is both a throwback to the past and an example of high-level play, if not the standard of how to run high-level campaigns. It doesn't quite get it right and it splits the party, but it introduces the player to an entirely new way to play Dungeons & Dragons. Does it hold up today? Yes, if you want a game filled with intrigue and downtime rather than just stabbing monsters one after another with super heroic player characters. Your players will use their minds more than their swords in Warlords. They will realize that all that experience they got carving through lost temples isn't going to help the crops grow. But it will challenge them and keep the campaign fresh so they don't get bored, meaning the campaign dies after level 10, like nowadays. Get ready to memorize the entire Turn Undead chart, because this week is CM2 Death's Ride. It flat out says in the DM's tips on page 2 that the party's going to need some serious amounts of anti-undead to succeed in this module. This module is famous for three things: using just about every form of undead from every source book the author could find, the awesome cover by Easily with the skeleton riding a dragon that actually isn't in the module, and tons of needless background information. So it's time to put the dead back into undead in Death's Ride. I'm Mr. Welch, and this is Welcome to Mystara. Written in 1984 by Gary Spiegel, Death's Ride is the second of the companion series and part of the Test of the Warlords quasi-series. It's set in Norworld. It assumes the player characters are also lords of that realm, and it has tons of information about the domain the module is set in. Actually, a little too much information. It's a 32-page module, including 4 pages of maps, and several pages are used to give background information that doesn't really serve any purpose in the adventure. In the beginning of the module, you make it to the barony that the quest is set in to find everybody's dead. Only in the back are the stats for just about every dead person you can find. So if you need to know the stats of Alar, Boli, Cully, or Darce, the squares of Baron Maltus, who are all like level 2, they're all on page 28. Of course, they're all very dead when you arrive at the first part of the adventure, so you probably won't need to know that. There's 3 pages of dead NPCs in the back of the books with all their stats. The module starts off with King Aracol asking the adventurers to leave their domains and find out why Baron Maltus suddenly went silent and stopped all communications. So instead of sending Ellen Ripley and a squad of colonial marines along with a corporate attaché to rescue the survivors of the Twin Leaks barony, the king sends high-level administrators of other more successful domains. This man really needs to learn how to delegate tasks better. So after you're dropped off by Pharaoh and Spunkmeyer with their dropship at Skullheim Castle, who then fly off leaving you stranded, the party begins to investigate. It's not much of an investigation. Everybody's dead. Spoilers, you're too late. The only people you find in the castle are monsters with 1 or 2 survivors that you have to figure out how they're surviving. So get ready for a few token fights against some undead and man-scorpions and a lot of boring checking empty rooms because that's what you have to do to search a castle. There's a few survivors, and you've got to restore them from various magical states, or just raise one of the numerous skeletons from the dead and quiz them. Either way, you get told that there's 3 bad guys that did this: a dragon, a cleric, and a magic user. You're going to have to deal with all of them so you can find out what they're trying to accomplish. You also have to get the Hammer of Life to destroy the Death Stone, and the first suspect you're given is the dragon on the cover. So questing caps on, we're going adventuring! Finding the dragon isn't hard. There's a large number of terrified peasants on the road that will tell you where he's roaming around. He's not exactly hiding. It's not much of a mystery. You're going to notice a growing black cloud overhead in this module. It's called the Death Cloud, and it's just above the barony, and it's your stock deadly cloud like in Castle Amber or Ravenloft. Enter the cloud and you choke to death. So by this time the party is experienced enough to automatically know dark clouds in adventure modules are always cursed, deadly, and just there to force the plot along. So you follow the dragon to his island, and it's another dungeon. It's a pretty short dungeon. There's not even 10 rooms, and this is where the cover controversy begins. On the cover there is a skeleton warrior riding a dragon over a lake of fire. There's no skeleton warrior worth mentioning in this book. There's no lake of fire in this book. You're certainly not going to fight a skeleton warrior riding a dragon. So here's your chance to fix this, dungeon masters. The last room you find in the dragon is his lair, and he's sitting there on his pile of gold ready to fight to the death. Only if you're the DM, don't put the dragon there. Make it look like he just left. Let them loot the treasure. It's all gold. There's no major magic items at all. The actual treasure is actually in another room, and the parties already should have found that room by now. So when they try to leave the island, have the dragon Corbandar fly out of the sky with a copy of the Shade from earlier in the dungeon on his back. His breath sets the river on fire, and then it's a battle to the death. Why does the river catch fire? Who cares? It's awesome, and it's what your party will remember from this module. It's going to be a tough fight. You've got a 20th level cleric that's going to put paid to the undead guy pretty quick. Then you're going to have this epic fight on your hands that your players will relish. So after the dragon, you get to go after the Hammer of Life, which is the relic you need to destroy the Death Stone, which you already found in the Dragon's Cave. This is the part of the module that's barely a page in length. It's just 3 fights, one after another, in the middle of a swamp with some moderately powered big bads. It's also forgettable, and it's just one monster after another, so nothing really special comes about the fight. Each monster has a fragment of the hammer. There's no real effort to get the hammer back together. You just touch part A to part B to part C, and you've got the hammer. The hammer doesn't really do anything. It's there to destroy the Death Stone, which, if you touch the Death Stone, destroys the Death Stone. And that takes out a major part of the module right there with absolutely no challenge whatsoever. Yeah. So you've gotten the artifacts out of the way that you need to stop the Death Cloud. So it's off to another big bad in the magic user that's behind the evil plot. It's actually a straight-up castle assault with lots more fighting, but this one's more to drive the plot. There's no actual confrontation with the wizard. He buggers out after you take out his initial defenders. You're supposed to find the next clue and move on. It's actually decently written, well enough encounter. You meet the big bad, but it doesn't end in his death. The fights aren't anything special, just stock monsters against powerful NPCs. You kill your way to the top, you open the door, he's not there, the clue's there, and you go to the next part of the module, which is kind of a reoccurring theme throughout. So you follow the clue and it takes you to Gollum Village. That's Gollum with 2 L's and an I, not the actor Andy Serkis guy that is forever denied an Oscar because he's Andy Serkis. Seriously, the Academy Awards have on the list for the best actor, the actor who does the best performance in a motion picture, unless it's Andy Serkis, because to hell with that guy. So this, whoever wrote this meant this for there to be a big fight, and there's hundreds of undead against the beleaguered survivors of the Baron Guard, but it's actually pretty easy. You've got some hill giants and some man scorpions along with over 100 skeletons and zombies, but at this level the cleric destroys undead a dozen at a time with just the turn undead ability, and that's not including using spells like Holy Word that just vaporizes massive sections of the army in a single turn. It's built up for some epic siege action with all the forces laid against you, but it really turns into just a cleric-fueled curb stomp. So after all the little side quests, you finally reach the Temple of the Stars, and it's time to put everything together to stop the death cloud from spilling out, so you get to face the evil cleric and wizard who opened up a portal to the Sphere of Death. What that is isn't exactly really explained very well. Best I got, it's a portal to the negative energy plane, or maybe the plane of shadows. This was done before the extra planar bits of Mystara were really explored, and even then that's not the strength of the setting. They really didn't go into the outer planes that well. Well, this is an extremely abrupt encounter because after all the combat you expect a pretty major fight, and you do get to fight a Drollam and the evil cleric if the party is having too easy of a time of it, but then you get to the remaining big bads and it's just high level undead that you've been fighting the entire module, and then it's over. They don't really explain the motives of the big bads or what they were doing. You just go up to the portal, and you have already destroyed the Death Stone by now, and then you just cast the right spell, and that's it. And the game is over. The module is almost nothing but non sequitur battles. The plot tying each battle to the next is marginal. Kill Boss A, find a note addressed to Boss B with his mailing address conveniently at the top. Why are the dragon, cleric, and wizard all trying to open a portal to the Sphere of Death? The party never finds out, and the DM has to feed it to them if you want to explain it to them, but you have to force in the dialogue. Instead of taking the parts of the hammer's MacGuffin and splitting them between the big bads, they're easily just grouped in one single encounter with each one of the monsters you face in order having a different part of the hammer. It's not quite a sandbox, and it's not quite a railroad, but it's an amalgam of both. You can go wherever you like, but once you're there, the encounter is set in stone. Now, the module is very well known for its art. Jeff easily did it, so it had better be good. Even with the internal art, he went all in. Is it enough to save the module from mediocrity? No. Was it enough to, back in the day, for people to scream, oh my god, it's a skeleton warrior riding a dragon over a lake of fire, it must be mine, and then just buy the whole module without finding out what it's about? Oh, you better believe it. 20 years ago, my boss over at Reaper, Ed Pugh, told me that good art will sell a bad game and bad art will condemn a good game. And this module is living proof of that. So getting the module is actually surprisingly easy. It was one of the larger print runs, and you can get a decent print quality module for about 20 bucks online. It's not in demand, so it's not hard to find on the secondary market. Again, if you want a PDF, that's $5 from the usual suspects. As I like the smell of old paper, I recommend getting the hardback. It's not expensive, and the art is awesome. Converting this to the 5th edition needs quite a bit of work. There's a lot of high-level undead that 5th just doesn't have. Also, BECMI high-level clerics went through low-level undead like a roided-out Cuisinart with a personal beef. And 5th edition doesn't do high-level adventurers well, and forget about mass combat rules. So if you're going to have to play this module, you're going to have to fudge the siege, retweak the balance of the high-level fights that are just found all the way throughout the module. Now, that's Death's Ride. It's a middle-of-the-road adventure that talks a lot about what previously happened, but forgets to tell you what happens right now. It's got a lot of great art to distract from not a lot of story and just combat after combat. You got a few weeks for a high-level adventure, you can check it out, but there are better companion-level modules.
Welcome to Mystara for another remaster as we're headed down CM3, Sabre River. This module is famous for two things. First, the 4.5 million gold pieces you can acquire as treasure, and the hellacious van art that doubles as the cover of the module. Look at that and tell me you wouldn't be proud sporting that on the side of your Nerdmobile. Other than that, this is a module firmly on rails, where you go from one dungeon to the next by sailing down a river. Or walking down the river, you can't actually sail it. I'm Mr. Welch, and take me to the river. Drop me in the water. Sabre River is the third module in the Companion series, as the code would indicate, released in 1984 and written by Douglas Niles and Bruce Nesmith, no strangers to this channel. Keith Parkinson did the epic cover art, and unlike the equally epic art of Death's Ride, you can actually encounter this dragon in the module. This is part of the Test of the Warlords series, as you're expected to have played that module or be playing it when this one happens. Epic is an excellent word to describe this adventure. Everything is scaled up. The monsters, the treasures, the encounters are not for the faint of heart. There are two types of people in Sabre River. Those who run away in fear because it's too hard, and the ones that spray paint their mouths silver and demand to be witnessed. Be the latter. As this is an almost 40-year-old module, and this review is mainly for DMs, there will be spoilers. Most people remember the absurd amount of treasure you get from Sabre River. Some of it's not easy to find. You must get lucky, metagame the adventure, or almost strip mine every encounter to find all of it. Character options from other source books like the Crucibles or the Gazetteers will help. In my campaign, one player was a merchant prince, and the spells were able to locate the enormous amount of hidden gold. But remember, coins have weight. Finding the millions of gold pieces isn't hard. Getting them back to civilization is. Have fun crashing your domain's economy. Monsters are the other thing this module has in abundance rather than just treasure. The big ones. People have long complained that high-level modules didn't have much of a challenge in terms of combat. And Sabre River seems to have taken this personally. Here's a list of the monsters in this adventure that aren't randomly spawned that will threaten the party. A Medusa, Basilisk, Black Dragon, Red Dragon, 5 smaller Red Dragons, a Gargantuan Gargoyle, a Gargantuan Fire Elemental, a Revenant, 3 Poltergeists, 38 Saberclaws, a Beholder, 9 Rocks, 6 Bronze Golems, 4 Gorgons, 300 Carrion Crawlers, no I didn't stutter, 18 Water Elementals with a Leader, and a Dragon Turtle. You're going to earn every copper piece in this book. The concept of the module is the Sabre River, which runs through your domain and is not marked on any maps, has turned poisonous and you have to stop it. This is explained to the characters when a small child named Cutter arrives at their keep and gives them the information. Then a giant bloody skull appears and gives an ominous prophecy, and the party gets told to go to the Seer, who can explain it. Since this is a CM1 related module, all the parties have their domains, so pick which character is on Sabre River and time Cutter's arrival for when the band's all back together. The water in the river is indeed poisonous, but the effects depend on the phase of the moon. Drinking the water can cause death, madness, or magical sleep. It has affected many of the animals who do not know that drinking from the river is a bad idea. The insane will always try to attack or sabotage those not driven mad by the river. On the way to Cutter's village to talk to the Seer, they get involved with a series of dream combats sent to them by the Hags from Test of the Immortals, but the players have no way of knowing this at first. The Hags later give out more clues, but other than serving up hints in later encounters, they don't do anything in the module. At least they aren't throwing Mystara lore on its ear by pointing out that Thyatis City is secretly El Dorado or something similar this time. You arrive at the village to find the entire settlement under control of the river's effects, and that Cutter's adoptive parents have been murdered. 40 normal humans then set upon the party with knives who wish to subdue a group of 20-plus level characters and force them to drink the water. This is a lesson in restraint. The wizard could probably solo the entire village using nothing but brass knuckles, but the villagers are obviously magically controlled. Plus, slaughtering your subjects makes for awkward questions at Thursday's next town hall meeting. The adventurer then heads to the Seer's Island, where he gives the party the nature of the curse, its origin, and how to lift it. It will require them to get a magical hilt to help break the curse. Also, they must take cute, adorable little Cutter with them because he's crucial to the plot. Yes, it explicitly says a group of 20th level characters needs to run an escort mission with an 11-year-old boy in an adventure that showcases the who's who of boss monsters of D&D. But don't fret. Cutter, it turns out, is entirely immune to all forms of harm and spells by a strange coincidence. Plus, he has magical powers that he can't explain. I'm sure that won't come up later in the module. This is an absolute railroad. You get told where you need to go, follow the river, and there it is. The module has almost no outdoor exploration. You go down the riverbank from one dungeon to the next. You get to fight all the monsters you encounter with none of the major companion set elements like domain management, mass combat, and certainly no jousting at all. Unless the Cavalier player is incredibly determined and his horse is fireproof, that is. This is a classic room-by-room kill-em-all, just like the old days, only with all the bad guys proud members of the TPK Villains Club. Sabre River is all about combat. There's no diplomacy. Exploration comes down to finding traps. Unless you have very specific goals, there won't be much world building or personal development. It's just legendary battles in every other room. The first destination they are headed to is the darkest place in all of D&D, Disneyland, to visit the Tower of Terror. Only this Tower of Terror features all sorts of flame-based monsters and lacks any appearance of Steve Guttenberg or Kristen Dunst. This is a dungeon carved into the size of an active volcano, because this module is the equivalent of what would happen if Michael Bay directed Raiders of the Lost Ark. All of the actions, all of the explosions, and all the monsters are cranked up to 11, and your players have to deal with it. If your players need ambience for Sabre River, I recommend 80s thrash metal. This leads to the most incredible treasure room of all time, where some spectral bad guys have stashed away 1,780,000 silver pieces, 500,000 electrum, 250,000 gold pieces, 75,000 platinum pieces, 1,000,000 gold pieces worth of gems, 700,000 gold pieces in jewelry, 45 potions, 16 magic weapons, not including the ammo, 7 pieces of magical armor, and 4 miscellaneous magic items. Of course, the players can't actually access the room without magic, though the poltergeist can flee to the room and come back and attack at any time. If you're using the pre-gen characters, it's a significant problem because none of them have anything more than basic weapons. There's also the strange fact that all the pre-gen are 20th level for the humans, which means the cleric and thieves are getting cheated out of multiple levels since the magic user levels up slower than anyone. Granted, the wizard is still packing 8th level spells. Any party playing since level 1 will have magic items coming out of their ears, so the limited selection for the pre-gens is slightly insulting. The rulebook says high-level characters should have magic items in value equal to their XP total, which is close to 2 million gold pieces worth of stuff for 20th level. This should get you more stuff than a sword plus 2, bow plus 3, leather plus 4, shield plus 3, and some magical arrows. This does make me think this was meant to be a tournament module, especially with all the railroading. If the treasure room isn't meant to be accessed, why have it in the dungeon? The adventure says it can only be reached by teleporting, digging, or plane shifting, but our dwarf punched through the wall with a magical ram, and the wizard can always just cast a spell of disintegrate the wall or pass wall. Before you get your hopes up, remember that the weight of just the coins in this room is just over 130 tons. That's before you add in the magical weapons and other items. That will fill up over a dozen bags of holding before you even start grabbing the gems and jewelry. That's the best part of the module. Players will go slack-jawed, staring at all the swag, and realize they have no way to transport even a fraction of it. And like the treasure you get from beating the Mulemaster Beholder Core and Curse of the Azure Bonds, anything you leave behind won't be there when you return. Cue the in-party arguments of how they're going to move this much money. It's a rather clever bit of module design, if a bit subtle. I'm only talking about this one room because it causes more in-party arguments than just about any other adventure I've ever run. The party will find the magical hilt, but there's no sword attached to it. They then have to go back to the seer to get the second part of the quest, and to no one's surprise, the seer turns out to be the bad guy, and the cute kid they've been dragging through a literal volcano and fighting one boss monster after another with him in the way is the polymorph sword. But if the players don't go along with this glaringly obvious trap, the module can't proceed, because you need the seer to turn the kid back into a sword, then wrestle the sword away from him to remove the curse. You can hear the train a-rollin', it's rollin' round the bend, and if the players don't play along, then they will never win. Once the party has disarmed the seer, then they can actually damage him. Nothing but Cutter will harm him, but he does die in a single hit. Then the party gets a vision telling them where they need to go to remove the curse of the poisoned river, and it's fortunately just down the river by a coincidence, where they will then experience one boss fight after another because the adventure designers apparently got tired of people complaining about how easy the other books in the companion series were. Be careful what you wish for, as while there aren't any hidden no-save death traps like Tomb of Horrors, every monster between the Seer's Island and then the heart of the river can squash uppity characters by themselves. It's mostly combat. You can't talk to them, there's no exploration involved. Just the party versus every boss monster from Shadows over Mystara. The climax of the module is a bit anticlimactic. You carve through all the nasties, get to the end of the last dungeon, and then take the cheerful, helpful, and rather mighty magical sword and shove it into the scar that's poisoning the river. Then everybody gets better. There's no real boss monster. The villain is the Seer, who is the personification of the curse, and he bites it halfway through the adventure. You just leave the sword with the mind of a small child in a fissure in the ground, where he will remain forever to keep the curse at bay, and hope nobody comes along and thinks a +5 flying sword that can do quadruple damage for 1d10 rounds a day, with a host of other valuable abilities, might be a great magical item to acquire, starting the curse all over again. The characters might want to set up a watch or similar. That's Sabre River. It's a strange one because it's little more than a boss fight simulator. This adventure has no random one-shot mooks unless you roll them up as a random encounter. It's on a rail from the start. The plot twist is obvious. It has shades of an escort mission, and there's little to it outside of fighting. On the other hand, the amount of loot in this book is borderline insane. Players tend to love or hate Sabre River. Combat monsters never want it to end. Players looking to use their charisma stat are going to be sorely disappointed. You can get this module pretty cheap. The PDF is available, and I think it's POD, but you can find used copies for $20 in good condition on most auction and secondhand sites. Welcome to Mystara for the next remastered video, CM4, Earthshaker. I know I said this would be a remaster of the Tyranny of Dragons module, but that caused a few minor issues with the order of the videos, so I decided not to skip around despite how much I revile the original Tyranny of Dragons review. I'm going to be doing all of my remasters in the order I did initially. This module is part of the Warlords saga, a string of adventures designed to be played in Norwald as subquests during the Test of the Warlords campaign. This was definitely in the TSR silly phase, which anything in Mystara that focuses on gnomes falls firmly in. It's known for the giant robot more than the actual adventure. Giant is an understatement. This might be the most enormous construct in D&D history. I've looked. Enough build-up. I'm Mr. Welch, and it's time to form the head. Earthshaker is the fourth in the companion line of modules, hence the code CM4. It was released in 1985, written by Zeb Cook, with Caldwell providing the iconic cover art, and Ben Otero doing the interior art. I think this is the first time we've seen Otero's art in a Mystara product. He's definitely got a comedy vibe here, but sadly I can't ask him about his work because he passed in 2013. This is a very short module, at only 24 pages. I think only Veiled Society is shorter. 2 pages are full-color art, several are only half a page long, and there's some obvious padding with excessive spacing on the layout. And there's 2 pages of interior floor plans just for the machine itself. Earthshaker, while a minor module in the grand scheme of things, established the weirdness of Mystara. The setting was about to get the Gazetteers released in a few years, but the authors of the various books had different ideas on what the world should look like technologically. To quote the Dwarves of Rockholm from 1988 on the dangers of technology, "It's important, though, that this dwarf technology not usually develop inventions truly important to the scientific progress of the world. If, for instance, the dwarves create an effective and viable zeppelin, then within a few years all the nations will have them. Do you, the DM, want zeppelins all over your world? If so, this is fine. If not, too bad. You've established that the dwarves have created an efficient and viable lighter-than-air craft. Only DM intervention can keep the invention from spreading, and too many occasions of DM intervention will strain your players' willing suspension of disbelief in your game world. 1 year later, the Gnomes of Serene unleashed squadrons of biplanes from their flying city high above the earth. Dwarves were all about making industrial machinery that they shared with no one. Gnomes were selling plane tickets. At this point in history, TSR was selling Dragonlance books as fast as they could print them, and Tinker Gnomes were a hot commodity. But Mystara Gnomes, while still mad engineers, were slightly different in that they were competent. They created advanced technology rather than just Magitech versions of everyday items. Biplanes, submarines, mecha triple the size of Godzilla, and even more scary, their technology worked. It didn't have random charts to see what goes wrong. It worked as intended if it was maintained and undamaged. This should be game-breaking, but fortunately gnomish inventions are rare, and very terrifying to the average Mystaran. The Earthshaker itself is a gnomish invention that, as the cover shows, is a gigantic construct. It stands 1,280 feet tall and requires an entire clan of gnomes to operate. To put it into perspective, that's almost 244 Winonas tall. If it were a 25mm miniature, it would stand 17.5 feet tall. It's coal-powered, but uses the clan's relic to give it orders. The machine can be controlled by a single operator using a magic device called the Mind Stone, but it's currently missing in a significant part of the adventure. Sort of. The machine runs on steam engines that only the gnomes know how to operate and can carry enough coal in its limbs to keep it functioning for weeks. The gnomes prefer to barter for coal, using the construct to dig canals or similar duties in exchange for fuel. If necessary, the gnomes can scoop the coal out of the ground and store it for later use. This requires them to process the coal and remove the dirt and other debris scooped up in the process, a task they loathe. So what's the adventure like? As you can expect from the page length, it's short. If the players get the best ending, you can run this in a few sessions, even as a one-shot. It's meant to be slotted in during Test of the Warlords, as it takes place over a week if you slow-walk the adventure. And despite the cover's premise, you get to punch a castle with a giant robot at no point. What you get is, surprisingly, just some boss fights. You have to figure out who's trying to take over the Earthshaker, and then try and stop them before it's a new game of Grand Theft Mech Warrior. The premise is that the liege of the players, one Duke Nevik, has been recalled by Erekol for reasons outside the scope of the adventure. It's officially a crusade against the heathens of the Wild Country, but if this isn't happening in your campaign, or worse, your players are the heathens of the Wild Country, you can change it to anything. The Norwold Hardball Tournament, a royal wedding. He's got to oversee a court case the king has had to excuse himself from. Or maybe Erekol just needed a fourth for bridge. The reason doesn't matter. The point is that Nevik is leaving, and the characters are in charge of his dukedom until he returns. Time to invite all your friends over for the greatest house party in Mystara. Or not, because things go wrong before they even get the pizza ordered. This part you can customize at will, as Duke Nevik never appears anywhere else in Mystara, not even in Test of the Warlords. So unless you rearrange things retroactively or set it up from the start, players have no idea who he even is. It's pretty apparent that this was most likely a tournament module, as it's written around the pre-gen characters in the back. It's quite short for a companion-level adventure, and it's openly humorous. You can have all the problems pop up in the party's domain without changing anything. The only problem is there is a time crunch involved, but that's a very minor problem that kind of resolves itself. The actual meat of the adventure starts when the characters are being forced to deal with a bit of courtroom judgment, but that's not settled immediately, and it's actually a minor plot point. The fun part of the module starts when they receive one Milos Formosius, an entertainer looking to bring his carnival to town. He will offer concessions and volunteer his help in various urban projects to win permission, and the party will agree because he's being honest and forthright in his offer. Also, they know what's coming just from the cover of the module and want to get into an epic fight in the interior of the most enormous construct in Dungeons & Dragons history. Sure enough, the third day after he leaves, he returns and does indeed shake the earth. He brings his entire carnival well before the star's arrival, not just to show off the lesser acts, but to calm the crowd when they see his mechanical marvel appear from over the horizon miles away. There's a commotion while the army starts to mobilize and people start loading horses and carts to flee. The party will need to keep everybody from acting rashly, and they have Milos there to assure them and explain everything happening. He offers the characters a free tour of Earthshaker, and everybody else in the village can also pay for the privilege. The rest of the carnival is a standard fantasy festival, mundane displays of acrobats, low-level magic, several magical creatures that are either charmed or work for pay, with appropriate security measures like for the Medusa. Tents are pitched, concessions are prepared, and schedules are posted throughout the town. This is where you can safely show off all sorts of creatures and characters from across Mystara. Milos has hired entertainers and workers from across the globe, so races that would be obscure like a Trugan would easily have a presence here. Have characters from Skothar or Devania present that are willing to talk to the characters. It's all for show, and all of them are dressed for the part. The real adventure is about to start. This is more of a distraction for the players. A good chunk of the module is the description of the interior of Earthshaker. 7 out of the 24 pages to be precise, including a whole page of art showing gnomes doing essential maintenance. It feels like filler, but it was important enough to take up a third of the book. This is meant to be shown off to the characters, but it's not important unless they take notes for the upcoming battle that will rage all over the machine. If the players want to know where the strategic locations are, that's a weird question to ask a tour guide, but it will help very soon. The villains are finally introduced on the module on page 17, or 2/3 of the way through for those good at math. He's a generic bad guy with a magical stone that can run Earthshaker without the help of gnomes or coal. He's got a selection of high-powered underlings that will serve as backup. The gnomes are no match for the baddies, but the players are. And possibly their minions as well. As this is a high-level companion module, everybody playing will possibly have their own private army. Try to keep the players from flooding the giant robot with just wave after wave of troops. The bad guys will try to stealth their way on board and steal Earthshaker. If they do this, then it's a race to stop the mecha before it destroys Alpha. If the party is taking the tour, it's a series of boss fights to stop them. If the villain steals the Earthshaker, the characters need to stop it somehow. They can use their troops, sneak on board, or try to trip it or something similar. The gnomes will flee the construct as fast as possible. The villain's magical MacGuffin stone means he doesn't need fuel or gnomes to run it. The evil Baron wants to conquer Norwald with his prize and doesn't think twice that the Emperors might take it personally if some usurper stomped on his son. His plan is doomed to failure. Canonically, the Alphasian army stops him well short of Alpha if the characters don't. Then the noble who destroyed the giant robot gets to mine it for all sorts of iron. The best ending is obviously to prevent it from being stolen. If the party can stop the bad guys from taking control of the robot, or defeat them and regain control, then the whole march on Alpha never happens. That's the beauty of the module. If the players take the right steps or use proper tactics and strategies, then the bad guys lose. You don't have to pull out a lame excuse on why the villains will get their plan to fruition no matter what. There's no backup bad guy, and it's not pivotal to any plot. They win if the characters get to the command deck and defeat, capture, or drive off the villain. That's it. It's not a complicated module. If they get really lucky, they acquire the magical stone that makes the Earthshaker autonomous, freeing up a lot of gnomes from trivial tasks. This earns the respect of Milos and gets all the characters made into honorary gnomes for the Earthshaker clan. The domain's morale increases and everybody gets season passes for life. Earthshaker isn't a hard module to find secondhand. Decent copies start at $25 online for original copies. It's not in heavy demand. This adventure is one of the most simplistic you will find. It could have easily been a Dungeon magazine entry. The adventure's only lasting impact was on the Italian Mystaran message boards, where they took the large number of Russian last names in this adventure and populated the northern part of Norwald with the Vatsky, a collection of loosely allied towns that serve as Russian equivalents. That's a pretty obscure entry, but it was done well enough that it's one of the fan bits of Mystara that is widely adopted. That's Earthshaker. It's a filler module. It doesn't add much to the lore of the setting and can be played in a single night. The big decision at the beginning of the adventure is made for you at the end of the adventure, when the rival nobles realize you have a massive construct on your side, or you just destroyed one. The end.
Welcome to Mystara for a long overdue remaster. Module CM6, where Chaos reigns. TSR UK wrote this, so you know it's going to be out there. It's famous for being the first BECMI module explicitly set on another plane and featuring villains so good they would later be retroactively attributed to Star Trek, with TSR stealing them several years later before the Star Trek Next Generation would debut. Still, since this is a time travel adventure, it makes total sense that the writers would see the introduction of the board, get inspired, go back 4 years, and create the Ord. I'm Mr. Welch, and get ready for a lot of wibbly-wobbly stuff. Where Chaos Reigns was written by Graham Morris in 1985, making this one of the few TSR UK modules, along with Drums on Fire Mountain, Nightstark Terror, and Blade of Vengeance, set in Mystara, or at least partially. I'm not counting Up the Garden Path because that one was a promotional module, not meant to be actually played. And finding a physical copy will require you to take out a second mortgage. Jim Bambra and Phil Gallagher get credit for assisting with the storyline, and Brian Williams did the cover art, with Jez Goodwin handling the smashing interior art. So this is done by the people that gave us Warhammer Fantasy First Edition. It's officially only 24 pages long, but that doesn't include the 8-page pullout with all the creature and equipment stats. If you want a copy, a PDF costs you $5, there's no print on demand, but a physical copy starts out around $25 on eBay, so not a lot of people are buying this one secondhand. Despite spending very little time on Mystara, this module is important in canon regarding Immortals, as it showcases that Mystara isn't the only planet that worship Immortals over gods. It also hammers home how serious the Immortals are about not using their awesome powers to wipe out races they don't like, even if it's a dire threat to them. The race in point are the Ords, a time-traveling group of science nerds who are trying to rewrite the past to ensure that they are the dominant species in the future. In the Ords' perfect future, there is no religion, so there is no worship of the Immortals. You can see the problem. A jealous god would snap his fingers, and those who disobey him would immediately turn into an overpressurized sausage, as a warning to everyone else that the whole "worship me" part of their beliefs wasn't a suggestion. Not the Immortals. They're forbidden from using their powers to kill the mortals, so instead they subcontract their genocides. Enter the player characters. The world that the Ords are looking to conquer is called Alos, and it could teach Tolkien a lesson on how to make a stock fantasy world. It's got elves, dwarves, wizards, lots of undead and similar. It's also got time-traveling Debbie Downers who are trying to change the timeline so magic use dies out, along with those that use it. Instead, all that will be left is a world of science and technology, perfect for the Ords, who will wait until they arrive as the future culture, and the world is already prepared for them. Don't think about it too hard. Figure that there's a chance that the Ord will become dominant, and the more they change of the history, the greater that chance is. You have to keep them from changing the past too much to keep the odds of an Ord victory low. And that brings us to the villains of this adventure, the Ords. Among Mystara players, these guys are almost the stuff of legend. To people outside the setting, they appear as Borg ripoffs. The problem with that line of thought is they predate Star Trek Next Generation by years, so the similarity is superficial. They do have a similar appearance, having large amounts of implants, but vastly different methods and motivations. The Ords were humans, presumably from the future, who devoted themselves to the ways of technology and have devised a method of time travel. Granted, this is one way, so when they go back to change the past, there's no way back. There's no time period where they officially come from. This is deliberate. The Ords don't come from somewhere else, they come from somewhen else. They're mute, communicating telepathically through implants, or if they have to speak, they use one of their many devices to duplicate the language, dialect, and the accent they're impersonating. They might not use magic, but they are firm believers in Clark's laws, so many of their technological wonders are given magical item equivalents. The Ords are the most memorable thing about this adventure, and sadly they never appear again. They have a whole section on their technological items, and the players can't use the items to hammer home the difference between their tech and magic. Players can't even figure out how to turn them on. Magic provides no assistance in operating the items or even figuring out how it works. An augury will reveal that neither do the Immortals. The only way to get one to work is with a wish spell, which grants you 1d4 wishes before it stops working, and then you have to use another wish spell. The most significant threat that the Ord present is the paranoia they cause, as they can change their appearance with image bracelets and work to turn their victims against each other as they enact their machinations. Think of them as part Borg, part Terminator, and part Thing. The gross, icky thing, not the rocky or handy thing. The adventure is broken into 5 parts, each representing a different part of Alos' history. As this is a companion series module, everybody has their own domain when this starts. Don't worry about that too much, as they're not going to be spending any time there. Some weird but harmless stuff is happening, like birds migrating the wrong way, plants blooming out of season, rainbows with the colors out of order, etc. The party investigates and finds a small and utterly innocent cabin that wasn't there before. When they get close, they get a mental exposition dump to the frontal lobes explaining the entire plot, and then the Immortals compel them to enter the cabin, no save, and the adventure starts. The critical part to remember about where Chaos reigns is that the 5 chapters are not meant to be played one after another. Like Test of the Warlords, you can play the first adventure, bugger off to go do something else, have a couple of other adventurers, and then the Immortals yank you back to Ilos for the next section. If you need a small adventurous filler, run a chapter of this module, then kick the players back out to their homes. The chapters are much shorter than running one of these modules in the Warlords series, and it does keep a sense of continuation. You don't have to explain the plot again to the players when running a one-shot from CM6. They know they're going back to Alos because those Ord boys are up to no good again. Treat it like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You're keeping the same characters, but the timeline keeps advancing. In the beginning is obviously the first chapter, as the party finds itself in the Stone Age where the simple and innocent Garls fight against the encroaching elven colonists who seek to drive them to extinction.
The party is tasked with helping the elves make sure that the proto-cavemen take a dirt nap so they can claim all the virgin territories for themselves. Garls are another creature that sadly didn't make any other appearances after this, except maybe a single line in the Hollow World, if I remember correctly. The Ord have taught the Garls how to domesticate animals like mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, so go watch the video on the megafauna of Mystara to catch up again. I'll see you in 10 minutes. The party arrives as the Garls are trying to drive off the elven conquistadors, so the elves aren't quite up to the Spanish levels of technology, with no metal weapons, a limited number of spells, plus their paella sucks. The party has to fend off the Garls and help the elves to get to the sacred Treant Grove to finally acquire their Tree of Life, and then they will dominate the area. Then the Garls will suffer the same fate as the Dortalizi tieflings and fade away into vaguely remembered obscurity. Along the way, the party will encounter a large group of humans who will join the refugee column, and then the characters get to watch as they form the first alliance of elves and men. The Ords behind this will obviously be the leader of the Garls, and the adventure ends when the party tracks them back to their cave and kills all of them. Not just the men, but the women and children too. I'm not kidding, the book states that once all the Garls are dead, the party returns to Mystara. When the party returns to Alos, this time they find themselves on a ship headed to an oracle who will provide them with the info dump. Naturally. They are now trying to save the dwarves from a Hephaeston who doesn't want them to learn how to work iron. Another classic Mystara monster that sadly only gets a significant appearance in this module. That's 3 legendary monsters introduced in this adventure for those keeping track at home. The ship then has to get to the location of the dwarves. Still, they first have to do a brief recreation of the Odyssey with sirens and cyclops and even that skeleton fight scene from Jason and the Argonauts, only taken to 11 with hundreds of skeletons. Hope you brought a cleric. And don't get too attached to the crew because like the Odyssey, they are dead men rowing. Remember this part if you're going to be playing the Master Series because the first module, Into the Maelstrom, recreates the Odyssey again. Homer is the official Greek poet of Mystara. This part of the module is based on every Ray Harryhausen movie ever made, so go watch those real quick to understand the feel of this section. I'll see you in about 10 hours. Back? Yeah, they don't make them like Harryhausen anymore. I still can't get over Tom Baker playing the villain in The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, but back to Dungeons & Dragons. You've got to deal with bronze golems and living rock statues, and the Ord wearing the absolute worst disguise, being some random lone human in a robe. He's convinced the typically neutral Hephaeston that the dwarves are imposters coming to steal his forge. So if you want to go for a diplomatic answer rather than just kill the bad guy, win the adventure, you can certainly do that. Or just kill the Ord so he changes to his actual appearance to shock the giant in that classic trope. This is the shortest section in the module. You don't even meet the dwarves until after you've defeated the giant. Bronze and Iron is the third and longest section of the adventure, where you must unite different tribes and create the second alliance of elves and men, only with dwarves and halflings. Sadly, there's no gnomes here because you could really use some air support in this one. The Ords have convinced one human tribe that the demi-human races and human tribes led by druids have to go. So the Colmead tribe has unified and slaughtered their magic-using neighbors, with wizards and clerics being relatively rare at this point. This section has strong elements of Kurosawa's work, so go watch his movies real quick to understand the theme behind this chapter. I'll see you in 3 days. Now you know the reason why I don't watch anime. Everybody else was binging Speed Racer. I caught Yojimbo on Saturday afternoon Kung Fu Theater. Akira spoiled me. Can you imagine Kurosawa and Harryhausen teaming up to make a Godzilla movie? My god, I don't think the world would have been able to handle that level of amazing. Anyways, back to the module. The party has to ally all the various groups to team up against the approaching superior army, and of course nobody likes each other that much. Humans hold grudges against rival tribes. The dwarves are still mad about the elves giving them blankets accidentally infested with beard pox, and the halflings are just tired of all the short jokes. You know the story. The players have to explain the magic of friendship, the importance of working together, and the realization that they weren't joking when they said they will personally kill any man that breaks and runs. Yes, this is the mass combat part of the adventure. The big battle does have a robot Drolem created by an Ord, so there's your 4th epic monster of the module. But you have heard this tale told many times, and you know how it ends. The 4th segment is the Isle of the Sorcerer, and you finally get to see wizards for a change. The location the party arrives at is the magical library, known as the Bibliotheca, where the most powerful wizards arrive to study the magic of their world. Only they've been kidnapped and replaced by Ords, who seek to replace all the wizards with themselves and exterminate magic that way. There must not be a lot of wizards, or the Ords can keep cloning themselves in vast quantities to actually pull this one off. This adventure is straightforward. Run a gauntlet of monsters and traps, free the wizards, kill the Ords. You can convince the elven guards about the imposters, just sneak by them, or chalk them up to friendly fire. Either way, it's a straight-up dungeon crawl, but with some rather nasty obstacles in the way. Lastly, we come to the last part of the adventure, the entropy bubble. It has the Immortals discovering when the Ords are coming from and sending you to deal with them. Don't worry about your charisma stat, because this is a kill-em-all. The Immortals did not pick you for this mission because of your amazing diplomatic skills. There isn't much to this section. If you want to know what inspired this part, go play Doom for a week. That's your motivation. You enter the Ord base, you rip and tear until nothing is left alive. The end. There's no prisoners to rescue, moral dilemmas to solve, or minds to be changed. This is a slaughter from start to finish. When you're done, you get sent back to Mystara with the thanks of the Immortals and all injuries healed. Except for energy drain. Immortal insurance apparently doesn't cover level drains. Also, your services are paid for with exposure rather than gold and magic. So maybe the Ord had a point. That's where chaos reigns. The adventures are middle tier, but the monster selection is top notch. The Ord should have been expanded upon in future works. They were just too good of a villain to make a single-use baddie. The adventure borrows heavily from various inspirations, but at least they stole from the best. The fact that it can be used as filler adventures between other modules does raise its usefulness. Sharpen those ears, folks. We're back to the adventures with the highly unusual elf-only module, the Tree of Life. This one fills in a lot of the background of the origin of the Elves of Mystara, taking the characters back to the Sylvan Realms, the original land of the Elves that they settled after Blackmoor blew up. The module is designed for a party entirely of elves, with the exception of a possible druid, so you have at least some healing. The plot needs a little kick on the pants once in a while to keep going, but if you're looking for a unique one-off, this is one of the most unique. I'm Mr. Welch, and welcome to Mystara. The Tree of Life is from 1986. It was written by Bruce Hurd, who's probably the biggest name behind Mystara. He wrote the Princess Arc set and was the project coordinator for the entire setting. Cover is classic Elmore. Mario Macari does the interior art. In the companion line, it's CM7. Yeah, I know I haven't done Mystery of the Snow Pearls, but that's a solo adventure, and those are bloody hard to review without giving away the plot. This one breaks away from the Warlords series like where Chaos Reign does, and so it's not tied to Norworld at all. In fact, it's all Alfheim all the time. The module reads like it was meant to be a standalone tournament module. It's designed to be played entirely by an elf party. Being this is BECMI, there's no thieves, there's no clerics, there's no high-level fighters. You've got a group of elven fighter mages that the module is written around. To compensate, the module is designed to be beaten by the party. You're not going to find many locked doors or traps. Since this is a module for around level 8, you don't have to worry about attack ranks and other high-level elf stuff. Actually, the companion level is pretty high. The module is for levels 8, which puts it firmly in the expert level set. So, yeah, calling it a companion level module is a bit of a misnomer. So this is the first module to start in Alfheim. The premise is that the Tree of Life of the Fiadiel tribe has started to sicken and die. If it dies, the clan dies. Turns out a long time ago, to avoid an invasion of the Black Horde, the original clan that Fiadiel came from hid their souls in trees. The big bad shows up, can't find any elves, and pillages the areas instead. This gets him cursed, and the curse continues to this day. Now flash forward, and one of his supposed ancestors has managed to track down the elven tree keeper that was causing the Tree of Life to stay up, so now the tree's dying, and since the clan Fiadiel's Tree of Life was a cutting off of that Tree of Life, if the original dies, so does theirs. So the party has to go back to their ancestral homeland, save the tree, and win the day. Yay! The module is broken into 5 chapters. It's a bit larger than other modules, coming in at 40 pages, and that includes 8 pages of interior maps. That's another thing that screams tournament module. You have to get through all 5 checkpoints to finish the module, which would give a tourney DM an easy method to determine the best party. Chapter 1 sets up the story, with the elves investigating a disturbance in the forest as a whole host of evil creatures are trying to find the long-dead founder of the elf clan. This part serves to give the party some combat, and they can be rather difficult in some encounters. But remember, everybody in the party can fight and cast spells, so they can handle their own. The druid can heal them, but it's best if the party avoids combat where they can. So you get all the clues, you find the Rainbow Bridge, and suddenly you end up in the land of puzzles. Seriously, the second part takes place in a room that is filled with floating crystal spheres and lots of colors everywhere. You have to play mix and match with the primary colors to get the right door to open. It's pretty obvious once you realize what the puzzle is. If they don't figure it out, there's a good chance the party's going to lose more than a few members here because the penalty for wrong answers in this trap room is pretty severe. Then you get to the third section of the adventure, and this is the part where most parties have problems with. It's a large number of fetch quests in a single area. The instructions on what to do and why to do them was in a room back in the previous section, but considering it was one of the areas you got to if you answered incorrectly, there's a good chance you could miss the clue entirely. An inexperienced group might fail to understand what they're supposed to do here or get paranoid about the voice that tells them that they have to get the 12 keys, so you're going to have to coach them if they need to push. Yeah, you have to run around collecting 12 keys, and this part takes longer than any of the other sections of the module. There's a ton of puzzles here, not all of them clear on what you need to do. There's a pretty difficult math question for those afraid of numbers. There are several interconnected fetch quests that end up with you chasing after missing keys. There's a star chart for the players so they can use it to keep track of which keys they don't have.
That's on the back of the module, but it's facing the players for the fold-out. Keep referring back to that to see what they haven't done yet. It's the best way to keep them motivated, because this part can get a little complicated. To get all the missing keys, you're going to need to go to the ancient elfin tower that's now the big bad's home. This is a straight up dungeon crawl with the evil wizard running around being an annoyance if the party really isn't stealthy. And this one can be fairly difficult, especially if there's no druid, because that means the party doesn't have any healing. Stealth is highly recommended for this part of the adventure because the big bad massively outranks the party. They're level 8, he's level 25. The odds of beating him are slim, and he plays smart. They don't have to kill him, though. You just need the last of the keys. If you go in, get the keys, get out, and nobody notices, you're just as good as if you kill him. So once you've got all 12 keys, you get to the part 5 of the adventure, where you get even more puzzles after a pretty brutal fight. Once you figure out the puzzle, then you get to play a nasty game of keep away, as one of the party has to spend an hour chanting while random creatures teleport in and try to disrupt the ceremony that ends the curse and saves the tree. Then this gets complicated, because you free all the elves that were trapped in trees, but they then promptly blame the party for their predicament. So now you get to plead your innocence to a pissed off elf king to see if the long-lost Fiadiel clan can be welcomed back into the graces of their ancestors. If the party has managed to come through with flying colors, you can throw an optional encounter at them as Morcroft's army attempts to slaughter the elves. This works if the party lost their trial, because it gives them a chance to redeem themselves. It uses the War Machine rules from the companion set, and it's a pretty tough fight. There's a few sylvan creatures that would help the party if they did well in the search for the keys, but the party is going to have to earn their happy ending. That's the module. It's a challenge for players. You're hamstrung because you are all playing the same class. There are several save or die situations, and you got a big bad that can wipe out the party with a single meteor swarm if they aren't careful. The fact that everybody in the party is a spellcaster can make some of the encounters pretty easy, but at the same time you've got one healer and no thief. The party is going to have 40 to 50 hit points each on average, so the PCs can't take a lot of damage. Now, the odds of somebody starting a party at first level and everybody playing an elf is slim to none, so this is mostly likely going to be a one-shot. If your party wants a challenging module, this is it. Initial spell choices are going to be important, because you can't try and rush it. There's a lot of insta-kill traps that will destroy you if you don't solve the puzzles correctly. If you're trying to convert this to 5th edition, it loses part of the charm because you've removed the restrictions on the classes. So if you want to make everybody an elf, you can have an elf cleric, an elf rogue, an elf sorcerer, and so on. And that kind of cheapens the way the module was meant to be played. But if you want to try it that way, that's up to you. It's just, it was designed to be played in a specific way, and altering that changes the balance of the module in ways that wasn't intended to be played. This is a pricey module, possibly the most expensive companion level module I've seen. On average, it runs about $50 secondhand if you want to get it that way. Then you can get it for less if you're patient on eBay or Amazon. The PDF costs you $5 as normal. The print-on-demand hard copy is $10. Problem with the POD is you need to give the players the star map, because it's an important clue and they need to look at that one. In the cover, the original was attached to the back flap and it faced the players. Unfortunately, reprints don't do pullouts justice. They need to perforate the pages for these to come out. That would be a major improvement on the print-on-demand stuff. Alright, get ready for another exciting review, as this week's Welcome to Mystara is CM8, the Endless Stair. And today's magic word is padding. Can you say padding? I knew you could. Get ready for a not-so-epic quest to find an artifact of overhyped importance while you walk from clue to clue trying to solve a mystery that will quickly find the party going through the motions as they keep going to the fridge to get snacks while you provide copious amounts of exposition for what's essentially a 3-scene module. Get ready for the only companion modules you can actually speedrun. I'm Mr. Welch, and this is the Endless Stair. Written in 1987, this is the only Mystara module written by Ed Elminster Greenwood. I'm not adding in the Elminster part, it literally says that in the module. Greenwood, of course, is better known for his work on Forgotten Realms, his only other Mystara work being the Five Shires Gazetteer. The artist is credited as Jack Fred, who I couldn't find anywhere in TSR's library. It turns out Jack Fred was a pseudonym among TSR artists when they rushed a piece of art that they weren't proud of. Kind of like the Alan Smithy of fantasy art. I don't know who for certain who drew the cover art, but it looks a lot like Jeff Easley's work, and he was known to use the Jack Fred moniker from time to time. The interior art was done by Graham Nolan, but there's not a lot of that. The first thing you'll notice when you read the module is how much extra information you are given to eat up the page count. It's a 30-page module, minus 4 pages for interior art, 4 pages for monsters and magic items, a full page of meaningless NPCs that you meet at the prerequisite tavern at the beginning. That leaves 21 pages.
But then he goes into 3 pages of detail about the tavern you almost immediately leave to start the adventure, and that's about 18 pages left, and you're starting to creep up on the Veiled Society levels of brevity. And that was a tightly written murder mystery. This is a 3-part race to the MacGuffin. There's 4 parts to the module. One of them is a 2-page walk to the dungeon. You start the game at a tavern when some hunters dragging a dead guy with no marks on him. Cue another murder mystery when one of the hunters that brings in Mr. Dead Guy is found mysteriously deceased a few minutes later. One gripe: when you use an archaic term for the outhouse, define what the term means. Hunter stands up, says, "Me for the Jakes," and walks off. Then Greenwood never says, what the hell does the Jakes even mean? You have to read the module to get a understanding of what the Jakes is. It's the privy. I mean, it doesn't appear anywhere in the module for the definition, and even it doesn't appear in my physical copy of Webster's Dictionary, so unless you're familiar with archaic terms for the loo, you're going to confuse people. Another gripe: this one's slightly less specific. There's 3 pages devoted to this inn. The entire plot regarding the scene is wrapped up in about a page of writing. Art takes up about half a page. Then you've got a page and a half of some rather specific information on an extremely generic inn. Greenwood tells you what bird is in a painting in a room you have no reason to enter. It has no impact on the story and it contains nothing of interest. But you can find out what's in the bathroom, how many mules are in the stables, and even though the party by this time is chasing after the clues given by the magic amulet on the first dead guy, you can interview every single person in the module even though they have nothing else to add. The wilderness encounters aren't really encounters, just locations where you might find something interesting. A hermit's shack and some random clearings don't really make for good encounters. It suggests you use the wandering monster chart you want to add into some counters. Another gripe: every single bit of dialogue in this game that's pre-written is in a box to make it easy to read. Until you get to the minstrel, it gives you the entire history of the endless stair that you're chasing after, and that dialogue is shoved into the description of the encounter. It makes for a really difficult read as it just bleeds in with the rest of the words. So you get to the dungeon where you find the clue to find the second dungeon. It's a pretty lackluster dungeon with some minor scripted encounters, including fighting a single Sturge. Seriously, one Sturge. A 6 hit point monster that might threaten a new character, but you're all 15th level minimum. It's about as threatening as a mosquito at this point. There's only one other scripted combat encounter, and it's with a much tougher monster, but not so much to make it the party actually think it's in some sort of danger. Then you get to the glory that is Arton. He's a platinum golem whose only job is to answer your questions, and he answers all the questions. A full page is devoted to this walking exposition monster. You can't harm him and he won't attack. Well, you can harm him, but he nukes himself if you try. He gives you the background of this module, and oh my god, is it a lot of background. So you get the clue, and you finally get to the endless stair, and you climb. Random things attack you or try to knock you off the stairs as you go, but 30 stories later you reach the secret lair of the Seat of Power. It's a pretty tiny dungeon with a guardian hand, a spellcasting magical hand that's literally a page of rules attached to it. You find the library, which is a half a dozen or so spell books, then you find the Seat of Power, where the big bad you haven't met attacks you to take it away. The DM is encouraged to give him some minions, so it's not just one wizard against a high-level party of characters. And seriously, this is back in the day where casting a silence 15-foot radius on a rock and throwing it at the feet of a wizard was a legit tactic. The Wizards of Apprentices should have worn down the party by now, but there really isn't anything that could threaten the party at all in this module. You have to create combat encounters along the way. This is going to be nothing more than a stroll in the countryside. The module doesn't even feel incomplete. It feels like a bunch of ideas for the first part of an adventure. One man-scorpion isn't going to slow down an extremely high-level party like the module calls for. The Sturge says it will flee when badly hurt, but one hit from anybody in the party is going to plaster that thing all over the walls. There's a little conflict in the module. The plot is half stolen straight out of the Treasure Island, and the end of the module ends up with the party holding onto an artifact of supposedly legendary power, but no way to defend it. There are so many words in this book, if you took out half the adjectives, I think it would cut the page count by half. So much of the book describes stuff to the DM that doesn't matter to the players. Who cares if the small animal bones you find scattered around the areas are voles or squirrels? Do we really need to know the content of every single room in the tavern once the party has been given its quest? You've got monsters in the new monster section that have longer descriptions than dragons do in the rule book. The module is so caught up in minutiae it forgets to tell a good story. If you want to throw this into a campaign, make it part of the Nora world cycle. It's supposed to be placed somewhere near Glantry, but you can put it anywhere without any effort. This is barely a side quest for a better module. You can just change the difficulty of the bad guy slightly, and the module suddenly becomes a basic level module. The treasure's meh, the artifact can't be moved, and the NPC backgrounds seem to be a writing excuse rather than a reason for villainy. If you want to pick this thing up, it's $40 secondhand. You can get it for half that if you're patient on eBay. Get the PDF instead. It's $5. You can print it out. The module isn't worth $40 unless you're a collector. You're not going to keep the players involved into the module for long. It's filled with recycled plots, railroaded adventures, and very little to keep the players actually contesting the big bads. That's the Endless Stair. It's not a good module. It's very lackluster and really doesn't challenge the party. Nothing stands out. Nothing is memorable. I guess there's a reason why Easily didn't want his name attached on this thing. So that's all I'm going to say about it. Today we finish off the Companion series with what has actually proved to be one of the most definitive modules of the Companion series, Legacy of Blood. I say definitive because it's everything that the Companion setting was meant to be. A ton of necessary background information, and for once it's needed because the module is all about finding out who's trying to scare people off their land so he can get it all for himself. That's right, this is a D&D Scooby-Doo mystery. So let's look at the last of the Companion series. I'm Mr. Welch, and welcome to Mystara. This is Legacy of Blood. The module was the 9th and last of the Companion series, written in 1987 by Steve Perrin and Catherine Kerr. Steve Perrin is famous for being a founding member of the Society for Creative Anachronisms back in '66. He also penned Chaosium's fantasy RPG RuneQuest, along with a whole host of RPG books way too long to mention here. Catherine Kerr is best known for the long-running Devary series of fantasy novels, as well as writing for Pendragon and becoming the contributing editor to Dragon. So you've got two people with solid pedigrees writing a module, so this should be a good one, and spoilers, it is. The cover art is pure clickbait because long before we had the internet, as the escaped princess hiding from the orcs only appears on the cover. Actually, so do the orcs. The only thing on the cover that actually appears in the module is the swamp itself. The interior art is from Eric Gellin, and there's a fair bit of interior art in this one. The module starts in a tavern because, of course, it does. One of the party members' second cousin, twice removed, has kicked the bucket and has left you his domain, as you are the only surviving family member that qualified to be a ruler. So off you go to Darrican City to fill out the paperwork to make the transfer legal, then you're off to Finhold, your new home. The module is very political in nature. It's all about fixing the numerous problems of this tiny little domain. There's no great military threat. The largest band of bad guys numbers only 30. It's located firmly between Alfheim and Karamiko, so you're very much in the middle of Darrican. There's no external threat. There's no border raids coming from the Broken Lands, for example. Once this module gets going, it's very much a bottle episode, as everything is located in the province of Finhold. When you get there, you're going to find it's in a state of disarray because inheriting a well-run domain that's chugging along fine would be boring. The old leader was trying to drain a fen, a swamp, to improve the road there. The problem is the Finn folk that live there don't want that to happen. The party finds out that the chief administrator didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't corrupt. He managed to get everybody angry at him because he just really didn't know how to run things. Of course, he turns up dead as soon as you arrive, so the position becomes immediately open. Once the party arrives, the true adventure starts. And Finhold is a mess. There's a laundry list of problems that the party gets handed almost immediately. It's an extremely poor domain. The road would help increase income greatly, but that would displace a third of the population. There's a large population of hen in the domain that don't trust the humans, and the feeling is mutual. The farmers and the Finn folk don't get along. That's the mess you walk into. Everybody hates everybody. Everything is in need of repair, even the manor home you inherited. All the normal domain positions have been vacated, so you get to hand those out to the rest of the party. And then it becomes obvious that somebody is messing with the domain to try to scare people off for various reasons. The mechanic in the game is the confidence rating. You start it off at shaky, and you have to get it to at least an average in about a month. It's not a lot to raise as far as the domain system goes, but there's a hidden bad guy sabotaging your efforts. All you know about the bad guy starting off is that he calls himself the Warlord, and he's stirring up trouble all over the domain for reasons unknown. Unlike a lot of similar modules, there's no obvious bad guy. There's a ton of suspected bad guys, and you've got to figure out who's the actual evil and who's just obnoxious. Most of the previous council quitter got fired, and more than a few people don't want the new road built, so there's a lot of bad blood in this domain. The challenges in the game are numerous, and they all impact the confidence rating. Ignoring a small thing can lower the rating, like not helping a farmer round up loose cows. It's a small town, so everybody knows everybody. Play favorites or concentrate fixing up on just your stuff, and people will notice and not like it. The issue, of course, is that everything needs fixing. The party will get run ragged trying to settle all the lawsuits, fix the infrastructure, and undo the sabotage. You will also have to get to know the dozen or so major NPCs and figure out how to solve the numerous beefs between them. And you have to do it quickly. The module is pretty harsh on procrastination and hem-hawing. More than any of the previous modules, this one needs to be updated to the rule cyclopedia for the skills alone. You'll make more charisma and intelligence checks than you will attack rolls in this one. Diplomacy is key for the adventure. The module lives and dies on getting things done without resorting to force. There's a ton of investigation and compromise that is required to succeed in the module. There is some combat, but it's at the end. Before that, there's some relatively minor combat. It's not much of a threat to the party. It's one of the most combat-light modules in the Mystara setting. Okay, now for the Scooby-Doo part. It's tough to guess who the bad guy is in this one because there's just so many suspects. Even if you do figure out who he is, you don't know where he is until he gets cocky and reveals himself. At the end, you chase him down to the obligatory dungeon crawl, which is kind of one-sided in favor of the party. The big bad is an intelligent villain. He's not there to confront you directly. He's got numerous plots to chase off the Domain Lord by making the Lord unpopular with the people, so the government of Darrican kicks him out and replaces him, preferably with the new big bad, just like in Scooby-Doo. You don't have to kill him. A good DM can save him for the future. If you could turn him into Bargle if you wanted to, but that would be too obvious. Play him well and you'll make the party paranoid, blaming everything that goes wrong on the villain, even the stuff that he doesn't do. The module is absolutely BECMI, because it's all about ruling a domain and changing the politics of the world. 5th edition would require you to run this with numerous types of house rules to make up the fact the game doesn't have rules for this sort of adventure. Additionally, because the module is pretty combat scarce, a lot of the more bloodthirsty players might get bored with it. There is a dragon they can fight late in the game, and if you grab its treasure, it makes the module much easier. Since 5th edition doesn't really give you much to do with gold, this is a great place to spend it. The module encourages creativity to deal with the numerous problems in the adventure. If the party has the gold to fix a large amount of the problems, let them. If the party has too much gold, then that can be a problem at high levels. This is the perfect adventure to let them blow it all on the roads, the buildings, the guards, or anything else they can think of. Best part, they will be spending the money freely and not having arbitrarily taken from them. The best way to remove excess treasure from a party is to convince them they want to spend it. If they're creative, reward them. They've only got a month to turn this domain around, but if they want to spend a few 100,000 gold pieces bringing in dwarven engineers to build a road through the fens without disturbing it, good for them. If you want to fight off the bad guys by bringing in a large party of mercenaries, that can happen as well. You can have elves grow bridges out of trees to accomplish the same thing as the dwarves, but still make the Fen folk happy. Reward the party for thinking outside the box, especially if they can successfully delegate the mundane tasks to competent NPCs and try to hunt down the big bad. Let them. That's the way this module is meant to be played. If they find the secret big bad lair and thwart them before he makes his grand reveal, give them more XP. You don't have to punish players for jumping ahead of the plot if they're natural leaders. Let the game reflect that. Now that I've sung the praises of the module, it's time for harsh reality. This is the hardest module to find in the Companion series. It goes for about $80 minimum secondhand. You can find it cheaper if you're patient, but not by much. The PDF is $5, of course. There's no print-on-demand copy yet. You can play with the PDF. There's not that many maps in the modules, but a separate map of the domain would be nice. Plus, I really like having physical copies. It's a rare older module with a decent plot, so of course that's going to make it cost a ton. So that wraps up the Companion series. Lots of world building with some high-level shenanigans. Of course, it's got some bombs like Endless Stair, and the Tree of Life was actually an expert-level module dressed up like a companion level. The Legacy of Blood was a good module to go out on. I wish they had made more modules like this in other countries. Maybe we need to write some more to accomplish that. I hope you guys like Homer, because this week we are talking all about him. The ancient dead Greek dude, not the cartoon character that died about a decade ago. We are jumping into the Masters Edition because we're covering the last of the modules for Mystara, at least for the Masters Edition. And the first module in this line was Into the Maelstrom, which was very obviously the Odyssey. So brush up on your ancient Greek epics, because we are diving into creating the second oldest book in human history. I'm Mr. Welch, and welcome to Mystara. Into the Maelstrom was written in '85 by Bruce and Beatrice Hurd, and you might recognize Bruce as the driving force behind Mystara. The cover art is Jeff Easley in one of his more famous pieces. Valerie Valasek returns to do the interior art. Now this module is for characters of at least 25th level, so by this time you're very well established characters, and you're going to need them because this is the same adventure that took Odysseus 10 years to finish. I would say spoilers, but this is one of the most famous adventures in human history. Just about every single major event that happened in the epic is present in the module. If any of your players have taken Humanities, they will know what's going to happen next as soon as they realize what this module is copying, and it's not going to do them any good. They've had almost 3,000 years to read the Odyssey, so the spoilers tags has long since fallen off. The Odyssey was no cakewalk, and neither is Into the Maelstrom, so Western lit majors be warned, your advanced knowledge will not save you. The module is actually part of the Norworld cycle, with a breakaway Alphasian province causing trouble for other parts of the Empire. The party is given a fleet of some rather large size and sent to reign in the breakaway province. Of course, he claims innocence, and it's up to you to whether or not to believe him. On the way back, you get sucked into the Maelstrom, and it sends you to the Star Kingdoms, where you drift around in space from Space Island to Space Island. The story initially involves Thaidas and Alphasia hating each other and trying to grab more territory, but that's a bit of a distraction, as when you think you've solved the problem, suddenly you're in a Greek epic. There are a few differences between the Odyssey and this module. Instead of a single ship, you have a fleet under your control. Keeping your men alive is a major point of the module, and it's one of the most difficult aspects of it. You've got hundreds of crew, and you're playing in an adventure that was one guy away from a TPK when it was first written. You're going to lose crew. Let me rephrase that. You're going to hemorrhage crew. Ships will sink, men will starve, and every island you land on is going to try to kill you. Don't get too attached to a good chunk of the NPCs. The main difference is your ships are flying through space after getting sucked through the Maelstrom. Instead of the Lotus Eaters, you meet the Zonga Eaters. Same difference. The premise is that this is the rubble of the planet the Alphasians originally came from. For once, the module cover actually shows you what's going on in the module itself, with the 3 rival immortals manipulating the party to get what they want. The party is getting used as pawns in a much larger game, but that's kind of how stories like this go. Now, there's a lot of proxies for the famous bits of the Odyssey that you're going to discover. Instead of the Cyclops, it's a gigantic beholder. Scylla and Charybdis become a Hydra and a vortex to the plane of water. Instead of sheep sacred to Athena, you get turkeys sacred to Vanya. The Sirens are replaced by hags with the same hunger and song. This is a meat grinder of a module, and it is unapologetically so. You get rewarded for saving your crew's lives, and you're going to earn every reward you're able to acquire. Now, the module isn't just rerunning the Odyssey. There are more parts to it than that at the end. There's surviving Alphasian cities still floating around in the abyss, and you're going to have to negotiate or fight them to get out of the abyss. There's a dungeon crawl at the end of the module, as you get to defeat the minions of the chaotic immortal that's been making your characters' lives miserable, but that part's pretty brief. And because this is a Bruce Herd module, there's going to be skyships. In this case, an entire fleet of skyships floating in the void. After you get sucked through the Maelstrom, your ships are floating in a surprisingly breathable void, but with no way of steering. Fortunately for you, the first place you come across has magical silk hanging on trees that will allow your fleet to steer in the void. And you're going to need that because there's a lot of things in this module that eat ships. The biggest addition the module gives as far as hard rules is to expand the War Machine rules into Sea Machine. In addition to the mass warfare rules, it covers most of the aspects of naval combat. As the technology base in Mystara goes from everything from late Roman to early Renaissance, it does cover quite a few ships. It is fairly generic, so you don't have to work out every ship in the fleet, and it handles ship and crew losses with some math and a die roll. It's a bit complicated figuring out fleet losses, so run a few scenarios in your head before you play with it. The module lets your characters know that they have made it. You are now epic level, and everything is suddenly bigger. Your characters survive attacks that maul lesser armies. Your enemies are biggers. Balors, aka the Roaring Demon, show up and attack you. Giants are 4 times their size. Beholders are the size of boulders. Entire nations attempt to stop your fleet. You're in the big leagues. Even the pre-gen characters start off with tons of magic items and 500,000 gold pieces each. So compared to other D&D editions, this module is off the charts. Here be dragons. Now, the module is extremely difficult. There are more than a few no-win scenarios the party is going to have to flee if they're going to survive it. You might be only 11 levels away from immortality, but you're still mortal. The 3 competing immortals interfere with the adventure several times. One of them is trying to out-and-out kill you. The others require you to further their goals before they will help, so you have to think carefully on how to proceed in each encounter. There's a lot of encounters, so the opportunity to screw up is always present. For Mystara, the module is already set in place. There's quite a bit of mention about the Sphere of Death, which has always caused confusion because apparently it's a physical place as compared to the Sphere of Entropy, which is more of a school of thought. The Sphere of Death was never really clarified what it is. Apparently it's supposed to be some sort of outer plane dominated by undead, but it's really not that well laid out. It's not even mentioned in the Wrath of the Immortals. This does become a reoccurring issue with several more adventures mentioning it, but it's not explaining what it is either. If you wanted to set this into another world, it's got a magical portal to basically Space Alphasia, so you just do some other adventure, then suck the party in with their fleet, and there you go. If you want to buy the module, you're in luck, because it's available online for less than $20 if you look. Master level modules are way above the level most people are used to playing at, so apparently there's not much of a demand for them. As usual, the PDFs will set you back $5. There's no print on demands for it yet. And that wraps up Into the Maelstrom. If you're familiar with the Odyssey, then you know what to expect in the module. Granted, if you're a party, you're going to have slightly more success than poor Odysseus, but you're going to watch as everybody around you meets a grisly death. This is true master-level adventuring. You're now dealing with extra-dimensional horrors. You have become the playthings of the Immortals, and you're being pushed into becoming an Immortal yourself. The range of the modules is well past 5th edition. That version gets to the BEC part of the old modules, but stops short of getting to the me part of BECMI.
Well, you've reached epic level. You're a minimum of level 28. You can solo most dragons, lay waste to entire armies single-handedly, and there's not even much that can even threaten you. Well, you have made one enemy, and he is a doozy. Remember that bad guy, Immortal, from the last adventure? The one that tried to go all Greek on you and destroy you in epic fashion? Well, he's back, he's pissed, and he's on the title of the module. So I'm Mr. Welch, and today we're going to try to survive the vengeance of Alphaks. Welcome to Mystara. You're in for a rough time this week. Vengeance of Alphaks was written by Skip Williams, best known for his work on 3rd edition D&D, as well as being the main contributor to the Sage Advice column back in Dragon Magazine, mainly by default because nobody else wanted the job. The cover is Jeff Easley, and that Pegatar has been seen on many a TSR product when they needed an epic-looking monster. The interior art was done by Mark Nelson, and while there's not a lot of it, the fire giants with a battering ram and the Thaetian troops unloading for an attack are quite impressive. This module dates back to '86, so you're still predating the Gazetteer series by several years. Now this is the last real module of the Norworld saga. It's dealing with a rebel noble looking to seize control of Norworld. To do this, the noble has sought help with the rival of Empire of Thyatus, and the immortal Alphaks wants revenge for the last adventure, so that's all on you. In the process, the party is facing an invasion of giants, a large series of puzzles inflicted by Alphaks himself, and a full-blown war all in their own backyard. It's not an easy module to run because there's a lot going on in the background, so your DM needs to read it a few times to keep track of all the happenings. First thing you're going to notice is this module is extremely high level. Minimum recommended level is 28, like I mentioned. You're just a few levels away from immortality, and you're going to have to face nothing but monsters that would have squished you just a few levels ago. Also, you are the new successful leaders of a sizable domain, and that's going to play a major part in the adventure. It's not a linear adventure. Several of the shenanigans inflicted on the party by Alphaks can happen at any time. You need to break them up through the whole module so the party doesn't think you're just picking on them. The module's broken into 5 parts, though one part is entirely optional. First part of the combat is your domain under attack by numerous giants. You have some dream sequences that are filled with foreshadowing, which can help you, the party, in upcoming events. You get a little nudge early from an NPC that knows the way to stop the giant raids. When you get there, the guy running the giants actually wants to make you a business offer to find some lost artifact. If you take it, the raids stop and you miss the second part of the module, but then you don't have to fight your way through a short dungeon. This is a strange module to run because it's all over the place. Part 1 is a wilderness adventure hunting down the giants. Part 2 is a dungeon crawl where you get rid of the leader of the giants. The third part is a half dungeon crawl and half dealing with Alphaks screwing with your domains through proxy, though most of the time you're just running around answering problems. This is by far the most frustrating part of the modules because it's almost all math problems. When you get to the meat of the module, which is a rather large, drawn-out war using the war machine system to determine the fate of Norworld, the module stops being an RPG at this time and pretty much goes into wargame territory. Yes, you can have a lot of role-playing downtime during this, but you're still moving armies of 3 nations across a map. After you decide whether Norworld is conquered or freed, you finish the module by storming the flying castle that's featured on the cover. Played as written, the module is extremely disjointed. First off, Norworld is, as written in Dawn of the Emperor, has no intention of breaking away. So King Arachal, who is the son of the Empress and would have no reason to try to succeed his kingdom from the Empire, as Thyatus would just jump all over him. There is some continuity errors between the module, which was written 3 years before the official timeline came out. You can fix this by having Arachal try to stay autonomous in Alphasia rather than completely break away. The 2 chapters that stick out like sore thumbs are the puzzle and war chapters. Having massively powerful characters walking around a random cave complex answering logic problems is a waste of time. You are master level characters. You could smoke Elminster while waiting for the kettle to boil during afternoon tea. To get sidetracked by some imp that's leading you around from puzzle to puzzle that adds nothing to the plot makes your players think that you're stalling for time. The whole section reads like padding. Alphaks doesn't actually appear in this module. All the chaos he unleashes is done behind the scenes. Doesn't actually tell you he's behind everything, but it's the title of the bloody module. So the identity of the big bad really isn't a mystery. He does screw with your domain quite a bit. There's a long list of various disasters and nastiness that hits your land and the towns you've established. Remember, you're some of the most powerful people on the face of Mystara. Your domain at this point is probably a major city, and heads of state come to you for help. So when your least favorite immortal starts messing with you, the DM is going to have to make it difficult to challenge the party while not making it look like the difficulty is being ramped up arbitrarily. And that's a big pet peeve of mine. In high-level adventures, when you only run up against high-level NPCs,
I know there's a lot of modules that are guilty of this, and I know they're trying to make things challenging, but when you're epic level and every orc you run across has over 100 hit points, it's going to cause more of an eye roll than a sense of challenge. You've earned your epic status. There's only a few hundred people equal to you in power level in the world. They don't all have to live in your backyard. You can still have cannon fodder monsters there to die in one hit to let the party know how badass they are. It's okay to let them be combat monsters for a while. So you get to the war games part of the module, and this is where the game just bogs down. You've got 20 turns of war games to decide the fate of Norworld. Then you've got to run a series of battles while the party tries to defend the various cities of Norworld. Though if you do too good of a job, the game cheats and starts teleporting armies directly outside the cities you were trying to protect. Add in the fact that Alphaks suddenly starts invading its own territory, and you've got a royal mess. Now, in this timeline, Earthshaker wants to be free of his mother. In the official timeline, his loyalty never wavers. In the pre-Dawn of War empires, he does want to break away. The best way to smooth these out is to work up a rivalry between Earthshaker's half-brother Xandar, who is one of the best villains in Mystara. Instead of Earthshaker wanting to separate from Alphaks, he just wants to stay autonomous. Xandar is jealous of his brother's success, especially since Xandar is a total failure of a ruler. Earthshaker isn't a wizard, so he has no claim to the Alphasian throne, while Xandar has magical power, and he is the heir apparent. So the Alphasian interference is Xandar trying to take over his brother's kingdom, since Xandar can't run a successful kingdom, so he'll just try to take over one that is being run well by claiming it's his right. Now the last part of the module is taking down the head of the conquering force, who's been cruising overhead with a flying castle. Since the party probably already has their own flying ship at this point, or the wizard can just fly them all up to the castle, you have to keep this thing hidden until the end of it, or they're just going to take it down early. The defenses of the castle are pretty laughable for a while until you get to the undead bosses, which are finally a challenge. Then you're on a timetable because while you're trying to fight the undead bosses, the castle is falling. So if you can save the castle by beating the boss monsters, you're going to find it unusable after all. That ends the Norworld saga, with either Earthshaker still on the throne, Thyatis finally conquering it, or Alphaks taking direct control. Now that's assuming you don't side with Thyatis all the way back in Conquest of the Warlords, which was a very real possibility, since their help was a major plot point in Red Arrow Black Shield. There's also a very good chance the party has long taken complete control of Norworld by now. The Vengeance of Alphaks is an extremely scatterbrained module. Parts of it are ridiculously easy for a 30th level party, and other parts are just throwing tremendous amounts of high level bad guys at you without pause. Then it slows down while you go off and wage a massive war, but it doesn't throw itself completely into the war aspect of the module like Red Arrow Black Shield did. It's hard to say what the plot of the module was. You could say it was to stop the conquest of Norworld, but that takes time getting to that plot point. The puzzle section is jarringly out of place because it doesn't really add anything to the story. The module is rather cheap to acquire. $20 on eBay will get you a good copy. It's not a module in demand, so getting one for the collection is easy. The PDF is available for $5 as always, but if you want a copy, just get the hard copy. It's there to tie up the end of the Norworld series, but it doesn't do it well. You fought your way through 30 levels minimum, and the module really doesn't address how powerful you've actually become in the course of the module. If Mystara had a weakness, it's in the cosmology department. It just never went into much detail about the outer planes, and this was compounded by the afterlife that really wasn't talked about much at all. In other settings, they discussed often at length what happened after you died. Mystara, not so much. We weren't part of the manual of the planes. Wrath of the Immortals did go into some details on the other planes, but just barely. So when I got up to read the first module set almost entirely in what was the other planes for Mystara, it came up with more questions than answers. So welcome to Mystara. I'm Mr. Welch, and today we are talking about Module M3, Twilight Calling. The legendary Tom Moldvay was the writer for Twilight Calling, making this his fifth and final Mystara module, though possibly his least known after Lost City, Isle of Dread, Castle Amber, and the green version of Palace of the Silver Princess. The cover art is by Ben Otero, and this is the second Flying Castle module in a row. Larry Elmore, of all people, did the interior art, which is unusual because he was normally reserved just for the covers of modules. And there's a lot of interior art in this module, possibly because it's a bit longer than the other modules. What the DM will notice flipping through this one is there are no pictures at all of the new big bad creature race. They play a major part of the adventure, and they are your sole focus in the last chapter, but you won't find a picture of them or even a base stat line for them anywhere in the module. This module is hard. First off, let me get that out of the way. The minimum party level is 30, so as a master level module, you are considered epic level. The monsters reflect that with things like a giant animated lake of mercury trying to kill you, or dozens of 10th level elves trying to stop you. Sadly, a lot of the monsters are just normal monsters made gigantic again. That's not a gimmick that I enjoy much. I've always preferred more bad guys than just making normal guys bigger and losing the numbers. The basic plot of the module is a scavenger hunt set upon some very thin pretext by your old pal Alphaks. He doesn't actually physically appear at all in the module. He's just there as an excuse to lure your players, but that information's in the background, so the players have no idea that he's even involved. And knowing that he's involved doesn't change a single thing. So long before the elves or Blackmoor, it turns out that there was this evil race of lizardmen called the Carnifex. They were the predominant life form and got punished by the early immortals for using some evil magic locked away in a pocket dimension. And they're trying to come back to invade you, but mechanically they're just high-level lizardmen with some magic that die a lot if you stab them. That's one part of this module that felt incomplete. I felt like large portions of the module focused on the wrong thing. There's no stat line in the back of the book for any of the Carnifex, but you've got a list of 29 rumors about the 7 realms you go traipsing through. It's hard to use a Carnifex outside the module as you don't have any further information on them at all. There's no background, no stats, nothing to make them anything more than just Monster of the Week. So to open up the Carnifex castle, because of the token dying exposition guy said they had to be stopped, you've got to go to all these different pocket planes, find the magic key, and bring it back. Expect some epic level combat in each one, though some of the realms, if you actually put down your sword and talk, you might actually find they'll give you the key if you ask nicely. But though most of them require a combination of combat and diplomacy, and it's up to the players to find the right mix. So another gripe about the module, there's a lot of pointless information for the DM's eyes that don't really serve a purpose in the module. Each of the realms is color-coded. It also corresponds with a planet in our solar system, or maybe a Roman god. It's not exactly clear. The green realm is about beauty, so that makes it Venus. The red realm is about struggle, so that's Mars. The only thing is that the Roman gods don't appear in Mystara, and the planets aren't mentioned earlier. I think they were mentioned in an early Dragon magazine article by Moldvay, but that's never mentioned in this module. And the module is definitely set in Mystara. It mentions Glantry, Darrakan, and the Broken Lands in the start. The Great Library of Glantry is a stopping point to get all the rumors. You can chalk it up to early installment weirdness, but nothing was ever clarified regarding this in any other book. So you go to all 7 realms, get the keys through diplomacy and violence, and you get to the Flying Carnifex Castle. Then after your epic extraplanar romp, you are off to a dungeon crawl. Sure, it's a dungeon crawl in space, but you're just extremely powerful creatures kicking in doors and killing supposedly super lizardmen that only show up in pairs. The Carnifex have some hit points and some magic spells, but once you figure out their shtick, they die pretty easy. Not to mention being the hidden prison for this creature is for thousands of years, and there's pretty much just a handful of them. The actual castle fight is rather underwhelming. For what these things were supposed to be, they're about as hard as medium-tier giants, till you get to the wizards at the end, which do put up a serious fight, but they don't talk about their motivations. You never interact with any of them. They just show up and attack you. There's no personality to the Carnifex at all. And when you get to the end, you find there's no real villain to this module, just random bad guys that you kill as you plunder through their house. For being masters of the world before Blackmoor, you don't get a real sense of threat of them because you're only facing a few dozen at best. The module has some spontaneously silly moments as well, like when you hit a pit trap and get doused with acidic barbecue sauce. Yeah, you heard me correctly. Barbecue sauce. The realms hopping was a neat concept that was done well, but the final dungeon falls flat. Which leads me to the realization that the master level adventures are largely wasted on the master level characters. Take out Into the Maelstrom, which was a retelling of a Greek epic. Most of them are just scavenger hunts. Mystara is about exploration and world building. Master level characters should be running around the 9 hells or partying up in the City of Brass, not clearing out a dungeon of uppity lizardmen. Master level is what sets Mystara above other settings in terms of power level. You've explored dungeons in Basic. You've mapped out the wilderness in Epic. You've established your mark on the world in Companion. Now it's time to carve your name across the multiverse. It's been established that Mystara is part of the greater D&D mythos. There's an Alphasian Dark Lord in Ravenloft. Planescape has a traveler from Mystara discussing the difference between the gods and the immortals. Mystara needs a guide to the outer planes to tie it with the other settings. It's been strongly hinted in multiple sources that the immortals know of the gods of other realms and do everything they can to keep the gods out of Mystara. Whether the old ones are gods have been a discussion topic among Mystara fans for decades now, with a majority believing they are gods, wanting to see what ascended mortals can do if they get put in charge of the realm. The immortals are usually on par with demigods or lesser gods in the other settings, but there's a lot more immortals in Mystara than there are gods in, say, Faerun. This explains why the entropic immortals are tolerated, because their numbers are needed to keep the gods from enforcing their will on Mystara. The immortals could even know and talk with gods from the different realms. This would explain why Mystara has an Odin and a Thor, even though they are just typical immortals. Since the immortals love taking on new identities, they could be copying gods from other realms and stealing their identity to better relate with their own people and the epic tales of their immortals. You could even go so far as to explain why there's not a lot of extra planar creatures in Mystara, like the complete lack of devils. In reality, it was because Lorraine Williams, after her ouster of Gary Gygax, purged any mention of demons and devils from D&D to pacify the satanic panic people. But you could claim that the Immortals deliberately keep access to the outer planes difficult to keep out those that would try to force their influence on Mystara. This would explain why there's no angels or there's no devils in the setting. There's no reason why the player shouldn't be able to go to those realms, but it always struck me as a missed opportunity. The Mystara cosmology has never had a decent continuity, with the sphere of entropy sometimes being a school of thought, sometimes being a physical realm. They've got the sphere of death, which was never explained. Now, there are alternate worlds which are dominated by one sphere or another, but this is always suggested to be the influence of those immortals, and if you took away the influence of the spheres, the realms would revert back to what they were. Now, getting this in paperback isn't cheap. It's one of the most expensive of the master level modules so far, with online prices reaching as high as $150. You can grab it if you're patient for about $40 or $50. There's a PDF for $5 if you want that route. It's a decent module with a disappointing ending, so it's up to you. And that wraps up Twilight Calling. You will like the planeshopping aspect with the various new settings, but the dungeon crawl against overhyped big bads knocks it down a peg. I hope you guys will forgive me if I go off on a few tangents on this one, because I found this module a little bit hard to review because it's just so similar to all the other modules in the master set. And I decided to just talk about how difficult it is to make a master level module and how 5th edition really doesn't address parts that Mystara got right. The more I read the master level modules, the more I realize TSR really didn't have an idea what to do with them. There was only 5 of them made, and with the exception of Into the Maelstrom, they all seem to be different versions of previous modules. Epic level characters need more than a dungeon crawl, or in this case of this week's focus, it's just a scavenger hunt, even if it does take part on another plane. But that's what you get with 5 coins for a kingdom, just a series of sequential adventures to collect the magical coins, and then you get sent to another plane where you have another bunch of sequential adventures until you get to the seemingly mandatory mass combat that's in every master level set. It's by far the most railroady of the master level modules. I give Into the Maelstrom a pass because it was based on a Greek epic, so you have to recreate that in the order that it occurs. So, welcome to Mystara. This week we look at the 4th module in the Master Series. I'm Mr. Welch, and we're looking at 5 coins for a kingdom. Now, this module was written in 1987 by Robin Jenkins, who's best known for his work with RuneQuest and Tales from the Floating Vagabond before he became a staff writer for Atlas Games. John and Laura Lakey both did the cover and the interior art, which was a break from TSR traditional use of different artists between the cover and the interior art. Special mention is the cartographer William Reuter, as this module has a massive amount of maps compared to anything else that came before it. Jenkins wanted this module to be freestyle, played in the theater of the mind. TSR wasn't having any of that and put in a mind-blowing 13 maps, which as far as I can tell holds the record for any module from the TSR days. 5 coins from a kingdom technically starts in Norworld, but almost none of the module takes place there. The opening has a bad guy stealing an entire town and teleporting it away. A friendly wizard then appears in front of you to tell you that the big bad has a history of stealing towns and just teleporting them away. The big bad is on another plane of existence, and the only way to get to that plane is to find the 5 magical coins that work as a key to crossing the planes. This is the 2nd scavenger hunt in a row for the master level adventures. Instead of a color-coded keys like the previous one, this is you got to get 1 of each type of coin. There's quite a few similarities between Twilight Calling and 5 coins, though 5 coins does have a doozy of an ending that I won't spoil. And 5 coins is, again, very much a railroad. You get the 5 coins, then you have to do an encounter involving each of the coins, then you have a mass combat scene, and then you finally get to save your city. And that's the end of the module. If you're going to do world hopping as a DM, you need to make the new worlds memorable. The world has to be different enough to make it seem alien. Mystara has a problem with that, with their master level modules that just seem mainly like you're visiting another part of the planet. Plane shifting to Kryn or Orth would make for an interesting adventure with the culture shock, but that doesn't feel like plane shifting. But if you go through a portal to find yourself in the impossibly beautiful Mount Celestia, or the insane and unpredictable chaos of Limbo, or the otherworldly eternal spring of the Good Kingdom, then you know you're in a place that can't possibly exist. 5 coins is primarily set on the plane of Aloysia, which will remind you a lot of the shattered remains of old Alphasia from Into the Maelstrom, with the chunks of land circling around a void. You got your 2 rival kingdoms, similar to Into the Maelstrom, one with the good wizards that are trying to help you, and one with the evil wizard that stole your land. The module has elements that seem to have been recycled into the Hollow World book, with the flying islands circling the sun. In fact, large elements of the book seem to be taken from other books or used by other books. It bears large similarities to several of the previous modules, though it has little to do with them. This is the only master level module that has nothing to do with Alphaks, though. The fact that the module is a railroading scavenger hunt is going to turn off a lot of players at this point in the game. Master level modules have to be earth-shaking in scale. 30th level characters don't do dungeon crawls. An issue with the Master series is they still focus on Norworld for much of the setting, despite the characters being plane-hopping juggernauts of destruction by this point. 5 coins temporarily sends them to another plane like Twilight Calling or Into the Maelstrom did, but they always return to Norworld. Jenkins did say the module was extremely difficult to write because it's hard to challenge characters at this level. And the module is Mystara in name only. You can use this plot in any setting. The Mad Wizard can just as easily steal Glantry City, Threshold, or Serene, for example. If you want to use the module in other settings, the target could be Tyr, Neol Dra, or Palanthus. I wouldn't recommend trying to do it with Sigil, because the lady tends to react badly to people messing with her city. And by react badly, I mean imagine Black and Decker's finest wares only with a personal grudge. The module doesn't challenge itself, in that the players are not going to have a lasting impact on the world at the end of the module. The place they do affect they can't go back to, so nobody knows what they've actually done. Okay, time to get this off my chest. The 3 pillars of game design that seems to be popular with 5th edition is about 2 pillars short of being complete. Mystara showcased that magnificently. The 3 pillars the 5e designers harp on are combat, exploration, and interaction. The focus of Mystara from companion level on was all about world building. The players are meant to carve out kingdoms and overthrow tyrannies. It's not about finishing the adventure, it's about making it a point to deliberately take actions to alter the very game world they're playing in. Whether you want to use diplomacy or violence, it's the focus on the goal rather than the method that matters for world building. The paths for immortality make world building almost mandatory in this setting, making for large political games late in the campaign. Another pillar that Mystara had a focus on was self-improvement for personal goals. This was a lot of games that come in the form of players providing subplots that need to be resolved in play. Now, it's not mandatory for a lot of campaigns. If the players just want to hack and slash, that's an illegitimate campaign. It does provide a method for the characters, however, to bond and create a cohesive party. The more the party interacts with each other in furthering their own individual goals, the better the party becomes. When you're making a campaign, get a few goals from each player that they want to accomplish, and if they accomplish their goal, give them an XP bonus along with any of the other players that helped in achieving it. And then you just keep coming up with subplots from the players, and when they accomplish the subplots, they get experience bonuses. It's got to be something that they just can't do on their own, and they're going to need help from the rest of the players. If they want to woo someone, the other players are going to have to play Cyrano de Bergerac to them. It's about getting feedback from the players on the kind of campaigns and side quests they want to do. It becomes less about how are you going to solve this adventure and more into the what kind of adventure am I going to throw myself into for my own entertainment. You're going to get more experience and more gold by going into generic dungeon number 7 to kill off Orc Chief number 5 than you are going to get helping the wizard get laid, but the players are going to remember having to play wingman for the awkward, stammering Harry Potter clone with the charisma of 8 than they are going to remember killing the Orc Chief. That makes for wonderful downtime adventures that just seem to be missing from a lot of the current 5th edition adventures. Okay, now I've had that on my chest for a while. I've always pushed people to set goals and reward them for meeting them. Rather than focus on how the players are going to do it, focus on what they are trying to do. It doesn't matter if they accomplish their goals, whether through violence, diplomacy, or guile, but it does matter whether if they succeed. If you want an original copy of the module, it runs for $50 on the low end on various secondhand market sites, but it goes up to about $100 for the better copies. The PDF is $5 as normal, and Drive-Thru RPG has reprints available for about $10. The downside to the PODs is they don't have the maps loose, and the book has tons of maps. So you might want to get the PDF copy and print out the maps, or go old school and photocopy the maps from the back of the book like we had to do in high school. I've really skimmed over 5 coins because the module bears so many traits to other modules. At its heart, it's a railroad with lots of big monsters that you're going to have to take down on your way to the next encounter, until you finish all the encounters and get to the fight with the big bad before he sends you into one of the most gonzo endings of any D&D module ever. That was another issue I had with the module, is the very last encounter requires heavy amounts of magic just to survive. So the fighters, dwarves, thieves, and halflings are just there along for the ride. It's the wizards and clerics shows in the very last part of the module.
Alright, welcome back to Mystara for the very last Master level module, Talons of Night. This week's book is a doozy, as it is the size of Night's Dark Terror and designed to flat out kill the party at every turn. Keep in mind this is a module that was designed for level 20 and up characters, so that means for some extremely tough fights. Don't worry, the entire party is going to die, however you will get better. Strangely enough, this module is actually a step backwards in power levels, as Twilight Calling was part of the meta plot and ended with the party pushing level 35, and this module is suggested for levels 20 to 25. Considering the encounters you're going to be facing, stick with Twilight Calling's recommendation. I'm Mr. Welch, and let's finish off the Master set. Written by then Paul Jacques, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Back in 1987, Jacques did the interior art with the external art done by Daniel Horn, and committing one of my biggest pet peeves in module creation, using cover art that doesn't reflect any event in the module. The module says it's for levels 20 to 25 on the cover, but inside it says 25 to 30. And again, the module is pretty much just one high-level encounter after another, and the pre-gens in the back are all closer to level 30. So the module cover is the part that's incorrect. The module is massive at 54 pages, but a dozen of those pages are handouts and NPCs along with the rules for 9-man Morris. So that's not as beefy as it looks. But it's still a large module. It's easily the largest of the M series. And the theme of the module is repetition. Spoilers, you're going to get ambushed by Nightwalkers, Flyers, and Crawlers a lot. And by a lot, I mean about halfway through the module, you're going to be expecting every encounter to be broken up by one of those buggers. And most of the time, you're going to be right. The monsters attack, and when you get them down to half hit points, they bugger out. It's a bad story writing to keep going back to the same tactic over and over again. The first fight's going to be tough because the party isn't expecting it. The fifth fight, not only are you expecting it, you've probably got countermeasures already in place, and the creature is going to be torn to shreds the instant they appear. Another bit of repetition which grinds this module to a halt is its strange love with the ancient board game 9-man's Morris. The game dates back to Roman times. Read up on it on Wikipedia if you want to know more about it. It really helps to speed the module up if the players already know how to play the game, or else you're going to have to stop the module to teach them how to play another game entirely. It does come with the board printed out and some pieces to play with, or you're just going to be using coins. 3 times in this module, you literally have to stop playing Dungeons & Dragons to play 9-man's Morris. That's another pet peeve that gets triggered, testing the player's ability for figuring something out external of the game rather than the character's ability to do it. That's a major problem with a few adventures, when they test the player's ability to do something when it should be a test of the character. If you want to stop a game because it requires the party to answer Winona Ryder trivia questions, I'm going to ace that test without blinking, even though my character who has no idea who she is. Stopping a game once for some sort of diversion is bad enough, but this module stops it 3 times. And once you even have to stop the first game of 9-man's Morris to play another game of 9-man's Morris. The meat of the module is partially related to going to a peace conference to decide the fate of Norwald to prevent a war between Theatis and Alphasia. This, of course, is not canon as the Gazetteer series came out, and the official timeline has the 2 empires in a cold war, not constantly invading each other. The Norwald aspect is minimal, as you spend most of the module on the Isle of Dawn, that location's first appearance of any setting. You spend most of the time in Thothia, Mystara's version of ancient Egypt, where you're going to learn to hate spiders. You get to the city of Adaro, and you have to find the library to get the information to find the MacGuffin that's going to bring peace to the 2 empires. First part of the trip, you're on a cursed voyage that the party is going to quickly recognize all the signs of a nightshade attack, and the fact that if you start to win, they just pop out of the plane and attack later when they're healed. You're going to get real tired of that real fast. Once you find the clue, don't worry if you don't find the clue. A random NPC will just show up and hand it to you anyways. You're off to find the magical temple to get the next clue to find the MacGuffin. And you've got some scary encounters, though. The module introduces squads of monsters, which instead of having the monsters come at you one at a time, instead they come as you a single group, which acts as a multi-attack higher-level monster. As you deal damage to the squad, the number of attacks decrease and the morale falters. It's a decent way of handling lower-level modules against epic-level characters. The modules are going to end up bloody smears anyways, but at least they're going to put up a fight. So yeah, I do give credit where credit's due. That was a good idea. I just wish they had added that before the very last module of the pretty much run of the mortal-level adventures. So you get to the magical temple and fight the large number of bone golems in the middle of a fungal forest filled with yellow mold, and you face the first encounter with 9-man's Morris. A vampire decides to force you to sit down and play a board game. Every time you lose a piece, one of the party members has to go fight monsters, so it does kind of break up the monotony of playing a board game. Only one of the encounters the random party member has to face is another game of 9-man's Morris. Once you finish the game of 9-man's Morris, the vampire attacks, along with Nightshade attack number 3.
By this time, you are becoming depressingly good at fighting giant abominations made entirely out of shadow. So, surprise, surprise, the MacGuffin is in another castle. So you get to trudge through wilderness to get to the actual hiding place of the MacGuffin. The module then goes into mass combat, as you have to befriend a tribe of Thanatons to defeat the army of Aranea between you and the MacGuffin. Apparently, the Isle of Dawn has been franchising out monsters, I guess. In the process of making friends, you're facing Nightshade attack number 4. I would say spoilers, by this time the attacks are so telegraphed they might as well be written in Morse code. You raise an army of flying squirrelmen along with some elves and some treants that happen to be living in the heavily wooded parts of ancient Egypt, and you have yourselves a nice little war. Finally, you get to the MacGuffin location and get to the plot. Once you get to the actual temple, you get to face the Immortal Night Spider, who has manifested on the material plane to stop you. As we all know, the only way to showcase a battle between epic-level adventurers on the cusp of obtaining immortality and the evil spider goddess hell-benting on stopping you is to play a game of Nine Man's Morris. Seriously, you have to play a live-action version of the game with spiders and PCs playing the part of the game pieces, and then after that's done, you get to fight the immortal creature, which can be killed somewhat easily if you paid attention to the dozens of clues you were force-fed earlier. So now that you've got the MacGuffin, you head to the peace conference, where you will be accused of kidnapping both Emperor Thincall and Empress Ariadne for about 30 seconds before that charade ends in another bloody intervention from a Nightwing that's there to get the party to follow it. As you dispel the magic on the polymorph messenger, then you get to head to the final part of the module. At this point, if the module isn't stockpiling dispel magic and restoration spells, you deserve what you get. You follow the obvious tunnel and get attacked by all the big bads, which, despite being the restored Immortal Night Spider, her pet vampire, and her half-spider pharaoh priestess, along with an entire army of zombies, the party is going to open up with meteor swarms for the first round of combat, and then it just goes downhill for the bad guys from this. So then after the big fight, you get to the Sphere of Death, where everyone is turned into zombies and discover the missing emperors and emperor have been dead for centuries, because time passes differently in this plane of existence, but it doesn't matter because they've left pieces of themselves that have been turned into imperial jerky. I'm not kidding. And you have to take them back to get cloned, but that's all spoilers, but it doesn't really matter because nothing really happens in this part of the module, and it's all for shock value. But by this time, the party is just screaming for the module to be over with because they are so tired of the constant undead hit-and-run attacks that the wizard has used spells like Temporal Anchor so many times he's about to trademark the name for his own use. So once you've got the Imperial Jerky, you head back and they get cloned, and the peace conference can continue. Then we launch into the next minigame, where each party member gets to play Junior United Nations and negotiate a peace between Thyatis and Alphasia, where the object is to get each empire what they want and to keep the satisfaction level of all parties involved in the positive based on a chart you get provided. Though the module doesn't explain what many of the entries actually entail, and if you succeed and everybody walks away happy, then the next war doesn't happen for another D6 years. That concludes Talon of Night. It tries to be epic, but it gets bogged down in mini-games, and the repetitious attack of the Nightshades gets tedious for the party quickly. It doesn't feel like a master-level module. Sure, it's got the mass warfare on every single module in this series has, but it's just a railroad leading to several dungeon crawls. The concept that was there was the ability to shape the future of two empires by dealing with Thincall and Ariadne as equals, but they're just cameos in the module. So much of the module assumes the party just isn't going to use their massive magical powers and hordes of magic items to just skip ahead and avoid all the boring stuff in between. I have no idea what the obsession with Nine Man's Morris was. One mandatory game would have made it a notable side event, but 3 times? To make it worse, the first 2 times are between one player and the DM. So like the Cyberpunk and Shadowrunner, Netrunner, and Decker issues, when Nine Man Morris boards come out, it's time for the rest of the party to go raid the fridge. The module does show the need for a Mystara extraplanar source book. There's a lot of continuity problems with the Sphere of Entropy being a physical place instead of a school of thought. That would be like everybody suddenly going to the plane of Socrates, where all of his philosophy is suddenly given material form. The module does make a big deal about the time dilation as you hop between planes, but that's just to explain how you return at the exact same time you've left. The master level modules as a whole were not impressive. None of them stood out like Night's Dark Terror, Test of the Warlords, Isle of Dread, Castle Amber. Talons of Night is no exception. It's disjointed at best, and it's just more of the same at worst. You're supposed to be questing for immortality, not running around on a fetch quest for some king. So what this module is, it's just a bunch of fetch quests. Fetch the book from the library, fetch the artifact from the temple, fetch the heads of state from the plane of death. That's not how you end a series on epic level adventures. To add insult to injury, after carving up a literal god twice in this adventure, you get told, congratulations, you've secured maybe 5 years of peace. That's insulting. The module secondhand is expensive. It can be expected from any 50-plus page module. You're looking at $75 for a physical copy minimum. The POD copy is about $15 on average, so grab that one instead. PDF, as usual, is $5. How bad do you want to complete the collection? That's the only question you need to ask when buying this one.
Welcome back to Mystara, Vatos, and get ready to have your minds blown. I mean, you're going to need to watch this video several times to comprehend the just massive amount of insane surrealism that is contained in this week's offering, the Immortal Storm. I'm talking sentient musical notes, trying to figure out how to disguise your nigh invulnerable player characters while they're trying to take the subway in Skokie, Illinois, and run through a giant Pac-Man maze on the elemental plane of matter. I've read this module several times, and I'm still not sure what I've read. But I'm Mr. Welch, and we're taking on the Immortal Storm today. The Immortal Storm was written by the immortal Frank Mincer, and his only module ever written for Mystara. Yes, he wrote the basic rules as well as coordinating with Gygax on the Marvelous Magic book, but he never actually wrote a module for the setting before. He did have one in mind to showcase how immortal adventures were supposed to look, but the editors at TSR changed the premise, so that module was sadly lost to time. This is also Mincer's last TSR work, as he left to work with Gary shortly thereafter until TSR famously unleashed their lawyers on that production. Larry Elmore does the cover, and Valerie Valasek joins him to create the interior art.
Playing Immortals is nothing like playing any other form of D&D. Players can suffer from the Superman syndrome where nothing can challenge them. I mean, what can challenge a creature who possesses reality warping as a basic ability? So the players are going to face a large number of creatures that are inexplicably on their own power level, or get kicked down a peg for story reasons. That can be kind of frustrating because you only get to cut loose at the very end of this module, and then it's just like the end of Double Dragon, when Player 1 and Player 2 have to fight each other to the death, because that's what the computer says so. The module does commit one of my biggest pet peeves numerous times, relying on player knowledge over character knowledge. There's a ton of puzzles in this game, more than any other module I know of. The opening section requires the party to solve several anagrams to get the adventure started, so bring your Scrabble tiles. It just gets harder from there. There's logic problems galore, musical puzzles, and finally a reason to use your college algebra with a math puzzle. If you're not fond of puzzles, this module is going to be one giant slog as you watch the rest of the party trying to figure out what to do while you're trying not to get bored. A few puzzles in an adventure is fine, but including all the anagrams this module has makes the puzzles over a dozen. The players have characters on par with gods. A simple logic puzzle is not going to even bother them when you can ramp your intelligence or your wisdom up to over 30 easily. The module is a stock scavenger hunt. Each item is set in a different world. Mystara does their outer planes different from other settings. To Mystara, settings like Greyhawk or Darksun would be considered an outer plane alongside Celestia and Dis. You'll be reminded Immortals aren't gods, but something entirely different. You can create entire worlds with your powers, but you're also strangely vulnerable to attack if you're not careful. Sure, you can't die, but respawning can get embarrassing if you get taken out by something feeble like a storm giant. The module starts off by introducing the Immortal Storm, and it's just that. It's a storm that's immortal that will destroy the multiverse with left unchecked. It doesn't get any more description than that. So the obvious choice to stop this reality-consuming storm are the 5 party members that just achieved immortality. To find out what you need to stop it, you have to unscramble the nonsense phrases it spouts, which are the first of the puzzles. There's 5 puzzles, one for each sense, and to find the 5 items you have to go to 5 different worlds. Ignore the Immortals they present at the beginning. It just seems to be like more early installment weirdness than a continuity problem. If the players push you, just tell them that the hierarchs that introduce themselves in the first attempt to stop the storm are just the alternate identities for the actual ones presented in later box sets. That fits in with the fluff of Immortals having more than one name, and the players shouldn't really worry about it because the hierarchs are just there as cameos anyways. MacGuffins that you have to track down are the 5 essences of sense, as in the sense of taste, the sense of smell, stuff like that. Each one is on a different plane, and each plane has different rules of reality. Some of them will be easy to relate to, others are just off-the-wall bizarre. The players have to navigate through the planes they travel to, find the essence, and report back to the big boys who sent you on the mission. It's a module made for starting Immortals, and it's nothing like the old adventures you were used to. There's no way to die permanently. If you get killed, you basically respawn, and you have to go get a new mortal body. If everyone dies, then you all respawn, but the higher-ups send someone else to do your job on that plane, and think less of you for failing. Your first mission is an easy one. You get to wrestle a fire immortal to find out where you have to go to get that bit of the scavenger hunt. This comes across obviously as a way to introduce new rules to players, and it's not difficult of a challenge as the players have to think out of the box to get used to the fact that they're not just regular D&D characters. This is tutorial mode, and while the players will instantly recognize that, it will help them understand the new rules. Okay, now this is where it gets weird. I am talking about the 3rd book of the Gormenghast trilogy Weird. The second part of the module has the players running an obstacle course with a sentient C note.
Not talking about a $100 bill, I mean a literal musical note. The entire second part of the quest involves the players trying to make their way through what seems like a scene from Fantasia, escorting a plucky musical note so she can be part of a greater musical number. There's a lot of riddles here, most of them musically oriented, and a knowledge of musical movement and compositions help immensely in this section. It's a very hard concept to grasp, and you're going to have to play it slow with some players. The third part of the module is the shortest part. It's not even 2 pages in length. It's a breather between the rather lengthy musical section and the larger sections to come. You've got to deal with sentient thoughts in this area to get the third item. It's not as difficult as you would think. You don't have to turn yourself into a weaker form, and the item is found by role-playing. So the players can catch a break, as the next sections are rather dangerous. The fourth section resembles that of a Pac-Man maze, where you have to find the Lord of a giant maze while a moon hunts you down trying to squash you flat that's in these hollowed out tunnels that's inside of a larger moon. You heard me right. You're being chased by a moon. You have to find the true Lord of the Realm, as there's an imposter, and of course you're going to have to defeat the imposter who's trying to steal the realm from the actual immortal. So you have to track down the bad guy inside of a tunnel-filled planet with a moon rolling through the tunnels at supersonic speeds, trying to squash the players flat. The fifth part of the adventure is possibly the most famous from this adventure because it takes you to the real world in 1986. There you have to make your way from New York City to Skokie, Illinois, and back again to find the last part of the essences. Your magic doesn't work, and your players are stuck in their mortal forms, though your stats are through the roof, and you outclass just about any mortal creature you face. Still, you can enjoy your stay in 1986. Go see Lucas while it's still in the theater. Pick up a copy of Frank Miller's Batman Returns. And be sure to pop in the newly released Peace Sells But Who's Buying into your tape deck on your drive to Skokie. This is by far the largest quest, taking up 12 pages of the 40-page module. Once you get the 5 senses back to the hierarchs, they will decide to have all the players fight to their mortal form's death for their own amusement. The winner gets to throw the MacGuffin device into the storm for the honor of their sphere. So everybody practice your Clancy Brown accents, because there can be only one in this one. If your mortal form is destroyed, it's just embarrassing, because it's just a mortal form. It's not your actual true form. The module is easy enough to acquire. I have found copies on sale for about $20. Nobody is looking for this module. It's not a traditional Dungeons & Dragons module. It's insanely high level, and this does turn off a lot of people. The PDF is $5, but just spend the extra cash and get the hard copy. Welcome back to Mystara for the penultimate product review, because there's only one book I haven't reviewed after this one, and then we're freestyling it from then on. Today's offering is I Am 2, The Wrath of Olympus. I'm going to be talking more about the significance of the module on the Mystara setting than the module itself, because it's a kind of average module, and that would be boring. It's not a popular module, none of the Immortal modules really were, but in terms of background on Immortal interaction in their daily lives, it's one of the most significant modules in the Mystara setting. So get ready to oil yourselves down and talk like Steve Reeves. I'm Mr. Welch, and we're looking at Wrath of Olympus. The module was written by Robert J. Blake back in '87. It's the second of the 3 IM series of modules. Keith Parkinson did the cover art, while George Bard did the interior art. The module is noted for being quite different from the Immortal Storm, with the focus being on Mystara itself instead of constant plane hopping. Don't get me wrong, you're going to be traveling to multiple planes, but all the main action towards the end is on the prime material plane. Continuity-wise, the module is a total mess. It directly contradicts the previous module by giving us new hierarchs and adding previously unknown immortals to the mix of the positions in power. Nyx is now replaced by Night. Dagia is replaced with Terra at the top of the matter heap. It keeps with the style of the Immortal Storm, with the party being summoned from different spheres and getting sent on a MacGuffin hunt, so it's not that different from the previous module in that aspect. The module is most notable because it goes into some depth on how Mystara can have immortals with the name of gods from other settings. Specifically, this module features the immortal Orcus, who, of course, is the demon lord of undead in Faerun or Orth. The module showcases how this can happen wonderfully because that's actually the plot of the story itself. The basic premise is some low-level immortals decided they were tired of being low-level immortals, and after traveling the planes and discovering the Greek pantheon, went masquerading as Zeus, Ares, Hephaestion, and so forth. So this precedent explains not just Orcus, but how Mystara can have Thor, Odin, Loki, Demogorgon, and Bastet, and yet have no god. The immortals are imposters. Mystara's Orcus was originally Oraguz, a warlord from long-dead Temora. Only after he obtained immortality and waltzed through the multiverse like he owned the place did he actually encounter Orcus, and Oraguz realized that Orcus, the demon prince of the undead, was a way cooler title than Oraguz, the immortal warlord from a long-dead nation. Plus, Demon Lord of the Undead has a lot more mnemonic charm than trying to remember exactly where Temora used to be. So this means immortals are running around in the planes as superpowered mortals in other settings. This gives you tons of opportunity. You could have Korotiko going to Toilet Paper Elminster's house. You can find Nobnar attempting to drink Caramon and Flint Fireforge under the table while they're trying to figure out exactly what he is. Vanya might take a vacation on Greyhawk to lead a mercenary faction in one of their countless border flare-ups just for fun. The module gives an opportunity to have the Immortals make cameos in other settings. If you happen to be playing Immortals, might as well go troll some of the other settings since their mortals are stuck being mortals while you get to be playing hopping demigods. Now the reverse isn't true. Mystara Immortals guard the setting jealously. This aspect features heavily on the module itself. They will absolutely not tolerate people setting themselves up as gods even if they are actually gods. The Olympians try to set themselves up in Darrican as actual gods when they're just regular immortals, and the rest of the immortals bring down the hammer quickly. Creatures from the outer planes also face a lot of opposition from the immortals, so gods, celestials, demons, devils, and similar creatures aren't going to be found in Mystara very often because the immortals do everything in their power to keep them out. Now, immortals might not be as powerful as gods, but it's not by much, and there's a lot more immortals than gods that would dare trespass. If the real Orcus would show up with a demon army in tow to express his displeasure against the imposter Orcus, then all the immortals from all the spheres would show up in kind. Orcus might be a god-level demon, but against 100 immortals ranging in power from barely demigod to just a hair shy of a greater god, Orcus isn't going to be having a good day. The lawful celestials and devils might have a side deal with the immortals, like maybe a passport system. While the demons don't care and take their chances, though if they get caught they're going to get squished. I know the lawful neutral chaotic alignment system doesn't mesh well with lawful evil demons, but if you were expanding the multiverse's interaction with Mystara, it's not a bad explanation. The module is fairly typical for an immortal adventure, including coming to a point where you have to turn into a mortal creature to finish the adventure. In this case, it's long-dead heroes from Mystara's past. You run around, you chase the MacGuffin across various weird planes until you get back to the prime material plane. Part of the module has a Greek theme, but not so much as, say, the Millennium Scepter. You gotta fight atop Mount Olympus against demons where you play the ancient heroes, along with several severely weakened Olympians fighting alongside you. Other than that, the adventure is really average. It's just another stock immortal adventure that really doesn't provide anything amazing to play. So while the module doesn't break any new ground for player characters, but for Mystara lore it's one of the best. It gives an established pecking order for the Immortals, and a wonderful example is how the Immortals police each other. The Olympian Immortals overstep their bounds big time, and they get smacked down hard. This happens at the beginning of the module. They lose power in the immortal tiers of the hierarchy, though in the course of the module the entropic immortals try to destroy the Olympians permanently. The module is hampered by requiring one of the spheres of power in the party, but that's rather strict. What if the party had two players that follow the same path of immortality? If the party had two dwarves, they tend to follow the sphere of matter for obvious reasons. That was just another part of the module that can be ignored. Finding the module is pretty easy. An original copy is about $25 on eBay and other auction sites. There's a few people that want double that, but they can keep wanting that. The module is beefy at 54 pages, but immortal level adventures were largely designed outside the scope of D&D. You're a demigod, you're not going into many dungeons, and you're going to obliterate most dragons. You're beyond the scale of the original game by now, and that turns off a lot of players. The PDF will cost you $5. There's a POD version for $10 as well. You might not play at the immortal level, but the module is more useful to you as a source material than an actual adventure, so you should pick it up if possible.
Welcome back to Mystara for the absolute last module specifically made for Mystara, the best of intentions. There's no nice way to put this. This module's goofy. Around 1987, TSR was in the middle of its silly phase, and this, along with Castle Greyhawk, were some of the silliest modules ever written. So let's get this over with. I'm Mr. Welch, and we're finishing off the Immortal series of modules. Best of Intentions was written by Ken Ralston and had the interior art done by Jim Holloway. If you don't know who Ken Ralston is, he's the genius behind Paranoia, arguably the best comedy RPG ever written. Jim Holloway did all the art for Alpha Complex, and the silliness of his style is very much on display in Best of Intentions. His illustrations are goofy, characters are exaggerated, and there are anachronisms all over the place, like one guy holding up a 9mm while sitting in the jury box of the Trial of the Big Bad. The art is funny, but it's also very out of place. The cover art is pure Jeff Easley, and he gets in on the silliness with an immortal slipping on a banana peel and crushing a temple. Breaking it down, it's a 5-part module that features a scavenger hunt across 24 different planes. That's right, you have to visit all 24 realms to get the next part of the adventure. There's a trial, there's some mass combat, but the majority of the module will be taken up with the scavenger hunt. The module doesn't require the players to each come from a different sphere of power for once. In fact, it doesn't copy much of the style of the previous 2 modules, aside from everything being a scavenger hunt. Frank Mincer was on different projects now, so this is all Ralston's work that you're seeing here. The premise of the module is somebody's bumping off high-level mortals with demons, and the higher-up immortals want it to stop. Cue the PCs if they have to reconstruct the shattered minds of another immortal to find the truth, and this starts the scavenger hunt.
There's a lot of variety in the various planes. You're just making pit stops in each one to find the artifact you need to restore the immortal, as well as finding all the mortal aspects of that immortal that have been driven insane and has been imprisoned. Players are going to find a whole host of intriguing worlds to explore, but actual details on these worlds are scarce. There's one plane that's obviously paranoia. You've got steampunk dwarves, giant robots in a blasted wasteland fighting to the death, a world destroyed by eldritch abominations, there's a world populated by massive and verbose bacteria, and there's two worlds set up to be a heaven and a hell to just a single occupant. There's many more, and you're going to have to search them all, so bring your walking shoes. After you restore the lost immortal, he gives you the scoop on the conspiracy to kill off all the heroes. Then you have to stop the conspiracy, but this part runs much faster than the rest of the module. The module does briefly return to Mystara, with the party has to figure out how to save a Thaetian army from being overwhelmed by trolls, without letting people know how they helped. At the end, the conspirators get put on trial, and the party can serve as witnesses to see justice done. That's the module. It's a pinballing scavenger hunt that goes back to previous editions to give some variety for the players, harkening back to their mortal days. The immortal modules didn't have a long run, just 3. That means they didn't sell well at all. TSR's silly phase is usually brushed over or forgotten for good reasons. Numerous puns didn't age well. Fighting your way up to high level only to be thrown into an obvious Tom and Jerry cartoon wasn't for most players. Comedy RPGs have their place, but it's very difficult to mix and match serious with comedic adventures. I'm not saying lighthearted adventures aren't good on occasion, but keep it light and don't go all Looney Tunes on the players if they aren't built for goofiness. Fish out of water modules can be wonderful. The loopy insanity of Castle Amber showcased this wonderfully, but there was also a hidden threat behind all the goofiness. The Immortal series never really challenged itself. Not the players, but the dungeon masters. The game promised literal world building and performing miracles and gathering worshippers as your new goals, but the modules kept stripping you of your powers and sending you back down to Earth as just high-level mortals again. Like the master-level modules with their obsession with Alphaks and sending you to another plane of power before dragging you back, these modules missed what players wanted. So much of the Immortals adventure could be done by master-level characters. Yes, the party can't cast Wish at will, but that's what the master-level players wanted, to go exploring the multiverse. They became nobility and companion. The next step is to let them adventure on other planets and fight demons and such. No, they can't handle the world-killing Drayden, but there's no reason they can't handle a Varrock, a Merilith, or a Succubus, or screaming, howling, and whispering fiends if you want to use the official BECMI terminology. Immortal adventures were meant to be heavily political in nature. Immortals can't interfere directly, so they have to be subtle. There's dozens of other Immortals, all with their own agendas, and the players could fit in as allies or tools, earning the respect and, more importantly, the favor of more important Immortals. Wasting their time on fetch quests is beneath Immortals, since they could just ask their more powerful followers to do it for them. It's good to be a god. I mean, all 3 modules were made for very low, almost beginning level Immortals. Maybe if they had increased the level needed to play some of these, it might have changed how the game was received. Getting the party to work together to create a new race or to build a new world was supposed to show them a new way to adventure, not go on 3 straight scavenger hunt for MacGuffins. If you're going to play at the Immortal level, the biggest threat should be other Immortals, not things they could beat back in mortal form. This setting seriously lacked an extra-planar source book that would have made the options for high-level play that much better. Buying this module isn't cheap. Cheapest I found it is for $60, and it goes for twice that on many sites. My best suggestion is lurk on auction sites and just be patient. You're going to be picking this up to read or just to finish the collection more than to play. There's a $5 PDF on the usual site, and if you want to just read it, that's your best option. There's no POD option, but this module has a lot of pullouts to keep track of all the realms that you're visiting, so that's probably a good thing. So now we're out of books to talk about. 102 weeks after I started this, and I've run the course. I didn't do the Thunder Rifts books because they weren't tied to Mystara until the very end, and I don't have any of them. The solo books I wasn't going to spoil because it would be like narrating a choose-your-own-adventure book, and there's something for you to discover on your own. But now I have so much more to cover because there's a lot of Mystara that isn't talked about. It's vastly different from the other settings, and I'm not going to let this just be the weird fantasy setting that it's got an unjust reputation for being. So I've been taking notes on future subjects, covering things like how Mystara humanoids are much different from the Forgotten Realms. In 5th edition, everything is written from a realm standpoint. Good for them, but Mystara doesn't follow these rules. Our kobolds are dogs, not lizards. Our giants don't have a massive pecking order ordained from above. Our dragons can keep it in their pants. Our fairy kingdom isn't just two fairy queens bickering with each other. It's a god-level Ard Ree playing 8th dimensional chess against mortals who still have the movement instructions printed on the back of their pawns. We've got continuity errors to quash. We've got new worlds to discover. We've got to seed the world with flora and fauna and populate the multiverse to put everything into perspective. So it's almost 2 years later and we're not even close to being done.